If you want to watch exclusive Naruto Lemon, then you should go to my boosty, which is in the description under the video. What will happen if the quarrelsome girl, always going ahead, finally breaking free from everyone's hatred and contempt, returns to the very beginning? What will happen if this girl's best friend, sealed within her since birth, also returns with her? Chapters 26 to 30. Enjoy watching. Chapter 26, Haku. Dinner at Tazuna's house was surprisingly quiet and even somehow gloomy. This time Naruto and Sasuke did not compete with each other, which is why Sakura was also silent. Kakashi, lost in his thoughts, looked somewhere through his teacher's daughter, which slightly unnerved her inner demon. Inori frowned at his portion of rice, occasionally casting angry glances at the shinobi of the Hidden Leaf Village. The owner of the house and his daughter did not dare to be the first to disturb the guests after a whole day of hard training. I wonder what your loved one is thinking about. Unable to bear the hanging silence and Hataki's empty gaze, the nine-tailed man drawled. What do you think, genius? The blonde snapped with some frenzy, chewing a small piece of pork. Calm down already! The tailed beast bristled, growling angrily at his Jinchuriki. I've already told you 1,000,000 times that it was just a joke. And the joke is quite successful. Already calmer, the fox said as he exhaled, partly understanding her feelings. Naru and Kakashi slowly moved away from the patch, where they left Sakura and Sasuke to train in control. The girl walked briskly a little ahead of her beloved commander, barely audibly humming some catchy melody, while simultaneously discussing with her lodger how Hataki would torture her. However, under this big word there was something more harmless, but does not convey even a tenth of the hell into which Kakashi plunged the girl, the word, training. Naruto didn't know what would happen now, but earlier, when she was still his ward, Hataki squeezed all the juice out of her during training. He did not pay attention to age and gender, demanding certain indicators from his student. Training her, most likely, as a clan child, or more precisely, as the heir to the head of the clan. That is, demanding from a girl what ordinary children most often achieve only at the academy. However, the kunoichi in the guise of a baby did not complain and trained hard, knowing full well all the capabilities of her body. Naru, can I ask you something? Hataki asked unexpectedly for the girl and her bijou. Certainly cute. Turning around, she responded enthusiastically, but when faced with the serious and slightly pensive gaze of her lover, she hastily turned away. Until now, when I looked at a man, the picture of their ridiculous first kiss rose before my eyes. Ara! Was anyone embarrassed? The tailed trickster in her head immediately drawled in a mocking tone, causing the blonde's slightly pink cheeks to flash like lanterns. And I thought that you had already outgrown your childhood embarrassments. He laughed, clearly enjoying his Jinchuriki's reaction. I've outgrown it, it's just that kiss. Naruto spoke offendedly, but abruptly broke off when she heard the stern voice of her commander. How much do you know about the nine-tailed demon sealed inside of you? Hataki asked evenly, ignoring her words, either having finally come to terms with his fate, or being tired of correcting this quarrelsome girl. Now this is something interesting, the tailed one drawled curiously, while his Jinchuriki was in slight shock from the question asked by Kakashi. She knew for sure that this conversation should have happened much later, right before the third stage of the Chunin exam, and with a completely different person. Jiraiya then explained quite a bit to his goddaughter about Scarlet Chakra, bijou and some of the abilities of the Jinchuriki. And on that day he corrected Minato's seal, which, after Naruto's first acquaintance with Orochimaru, completely blocked all the flows of chakra in the girl's body. And at the same time, he slightly weakened it so that the blonde could finally freely use the chakra of her harmful bijou and, in the end, establish the circulation of her own chakra. How could I forget? The kunoichi shouted loudly, almost jumping on the spot from the overwhelming happiness. Kakashi, who was following her, shuddered and almost dropped his crutches, because of which he was trailing a little behind his student. The girl, finally remembering that she was not alone, quickly bit her tongue and covered her mouth with her hands to be sure. Not even a year has passed. Kurama laughed ironically in her skull and immediately added mockingly. Although no, much more time has passed. Shut up, fox face! The girl shushed her tenant offendedly, and turning completely towards her commander, walked backwards. I only know what my dad told me, Kakashi-sensei. She shrugged her shoulders as indifferently as she could, mentally hoping that her words sounded believable, and trying to distract the man from her exclamation earlier, she spoke thoughtfully. As the heiress of the Uzumaki clan, I have one of the strongest tailed beasts sealed within me. Nine-tailed demon fox. Before me, his vessel was my mother, Kushina Uzumaki, and the wife of the first Hokage Hashirama Senju, Mito Uzumaki. I should not be afraid of the Biju and indulge his words, and then I will be able to restrain his destructive power within myself. She made a speech that her father read to her when Naruto was about 3 years old, trying not to look at the man out of embarrassment mixed with a feeling of shame because of yet another lie. So, Minato-sensei didn't go into details, exhaling, Hatake said slightly sadly. And looking around, he grunted with satisfaction, threw his crutches into the grass and sat down near one of the tall trees. Naruto turned around and, having also looked around, whistled barely audibly. For all her thoughts, the girl did not even notice how they came out into a large clearing overgrown with tall grass. The sun, which appears so rarely in this country, shone incredibly brightly today, illuminating the entire space with its golden light, which is why this clearing looked simply fabulous. It's just that Kakashi's frown, which the kunoichi stumbled upon when she turned around to inform him of her observations, did not allow her to properly enjoy the local landscape. You can use the 9 Tails chakra as your own, Naruto, Hatake spoke, breaking the silence, diluted with trills and chattering. Moreover, at a certain concentration, you are able to use the so-called cover of the tailed beast, he said, looking down. The kunoichi only batted her eyelashes in surprise, looking at her mentor with all her eyes. It gives, Kurama chuckled, just as surprised as his Jinchuriki by the words of the copy ninja. Is he really? The blonde mumbled in disbelief. Do you want to teach me how to use the cover? For a moment, forgetting about her embarrassment and game, Nero asked out loud, looking seriously at her beloved, voicing the only, at least in her opinion, adequate version of the interpretation of his words. You, Naruto! He doesn't have the key to the seal. The tailed one ironically threw at her assumption, literally a second ahead of Kakashi's own words. No, Copy Ninja shook his head, looking at the confused girl in front of him. In order for you to master the cover, you need to weaken the Hack no Fuin Shiki, and only your father has the key to it. Man, he smiled broadly at her through his thick black mask, spreading his arms. Although, as for me, you're still too young for this. Hatake grinned and patted the ground next to him, inviting Naruto to sit down next to him. But what is he going to teach me then if he started talking about you and the seal of the 8 trigrams of the Pope? Slowly approaching her beloved, the kunoichi in the body of a teenager asked. Never forget who Kakashi Hatake is, Naruto! The tailed trickster growled in a mentoring tone, instantly losing all his frivolity. The blonde only snorted at his words and sat down next to her sensei, on the one hand realizing that now, however, as most often, Kurama is right. But on the other hand vehemently not wanting to openly admit this fact. You're probably wondering why I was saying all this. Meanwhile, Kakashi grinned, perfectly seeing the curious glances that the blonde was cautiously throwing at him, still embarrassed by yesterday. To be honest, it wasn't any easier for him, because he knew that Nera loved him, and he himself finally realized that he loved her. In general, despite the fact that their kiss was completely innocent, for him it turned out to be much more intimate sex with other girls. Therefore, now, looking at this little innocent angel, Kakashi, despite quite a lot of experience with women, turned into a boy in love. Fortunately, the endurance of the ANBU captain has not gone away over the past 13 years, having saved Hatake more than once over the many years of working with the prankster Naruto. I wanted to teach you how to summon the Hatake clan. I call upon the Ninkins. Turning to her, he said with a slight smile, enjoying the complete confusion on the girl's face. So I can summon your ninja dogs? Freezing! The blonde cried, joyfully, like a child clapping her hands. Oh my god, this is the cutest marriage proposal! Simultaneously with her words, the Nine Tails literally exploded with laughter in Naruto's head. What else are you talking about? What kind of proposal is that? The girl hesitantly asked her still laughing friend, clearly feeling that she was missing perhaps the most important detail from her commander's words. The catch is that now, despite your chakra reserves and potential, due to problems with Minato's seal, you are unlikely to be able to summon anyone other than Pakken or Baisuke. Nodding at his student's words, Hatake continued, trying to convey to her the essence of the problem. God, what are you really like? Kurama drawled ironically, enjoying her misunderstanding and confused face. Your beloved is going to teach you a summoning that only his clan used in the entire village, that is, the tailed trickster said slowly, feeling with his tail how the essence of his words reached his Jinchuriki. No, of course, the Nine Tails understood that Kakashi himself most likely did not put such a meaning into his proposal, but he simply could not miss such a chance to joke about this blonde. Not really, Naruto squeaked, blushing bright scarlet, missing her commander's words about how to perform the summoning technique. This can't be true, she blurted out, and interrupting Hataki's monologue, jumped to her feet and shouted, I'm not ready to get married yet. What? Kakashi choked on air, and in the girl's head the nine-tailed demon fox fell into real hysterics. The atmosphere in the dining room only became heavier every minute, and the food literally got stuck in my throat. Naruto, having finally finished chewing a piece of pork, exhaled imperceptibly and closing her eyes tried to calm down. After all, in the end, she and Kakashi found out everything and agreed that this was a simple misunderstanding, and Naru did conclude a contract with the Niken of the Hatake clan, as before, in her past life, with the toads of Mount Mayaboku, signing a special scroll. True, as the copy ninja said, she was only able to summon Pakken, the smallest of all ninja dogs. Hey, why is there a torn photograph hanging on your wall? Unexpectedly for the blonde, Sakura asked, threatening to further aggravate the situation. Inari sometimes cast such glances at her. The pink-haired girl continued to pick at the child's wounds, as if she didn't understand what exactly she was doing. Although, perhaps, she really didn't understand this, because at 13 you don't really think about such things. It looks like someone deliberately tore off a corner so that one face would not be visible, she finished and turned to the owners of the house, who had lowered their eyes. Who pulled her by the tongue? The kunoichi sighed to herself, seeing how badly Inari's eyes lit up, ready to break into either crying or screaming. Even Kakashi somehow looked too gloomily at his second student, who was clearly minding her own business. And I said cannot! The nine-tailed trickster laughed sarcastically in her head. It is my husband, Tsunami finally said quietly and fell silent abruptly. And a man who was called the hero of our country. Tazuna finished for his daughter, watching his grandson silently get up from the table and leave the dining room. Inari, where are you going? His mother shouted after him, but the boy simply ignored it, loudly slamming the door behind him. Inari. Dad, I asked you not to talk about him in front of the child. She immediately got angry with her father, running out after her son. However, it was immediately clear that she just wanted to let off steam. What's the matter with Inari? Sakura asked carefully, finally realizing that she shouldn't have started this conversation. It looks like there is some explanation for this, Kakashi said dully and tiredly through his thick mask, looking down at the unfinished tea. Inari had a stepfather, Tazuna spoke sadly, looking at the shinobi of the Hidden Leaf village one by one. They got along wonderfully, just like a real father and son. It's not any easier to hear it a second time, Naruto muttered gloomily, in order to somehow escape from the unpleasant conversation. She already knew how much his stepfather influenced Inari. The boy literally idolized Kaiza. However, there was a reason, because he really was someone who could be called a real hero. Naru also knew what a terrible death, unworthy of his life, this man died, who defended what he believed in to the last. Just like her own parents died protecting Konoha and Naruto herself. Therefore, the kunoichi simply did not want to hear this again, feeling like the last creature, because, unlike him, she had a second chance. Don't drift. Snatching Naru from her melancholic thoughts, Kurama laughed sarcastically in the blonde's head, making her perk up and listen to Tezuna's words. Everything will be fine with this kid, you know that yourself. While the bridge builder moved on to the part about Gato, the tailed trickster drawled and added slightly mockingly. However, just like with us last time. After all, not everyone gets a second chance, but only those who can overcome it. The girl shuddered and blinked her eyes in surprise, trying to comprehend what Kurama told her. After all, this was exactly what she thought about, but kept silent, considering it too secret. Where are you from? She began, but was interrupted by the sorrowful sigh of her forced lodger. We've been together for over 30 years, darling, so don't even try to hide your thoughts from me. Kurama roared fervently, but at the same time somehow moralizingly, leaving a drop of warmth somewhere deep in the heart of his Jinchuriki. Naruto mentally nodded with satisfaction and returned to Tezuna's story, which had just come to an end. Horrible was all Sakura could say when she heard how inhumanely Gato acted towards Kaiza and the entire country of waves. No, we will prove to him that heroes exist in our world. Jumping to her feet and extending her fist forward, Nara shouted loudly to the agreement of Sasuke, who had been silent all this time. It was the 6th day of training, and it was on this day that Naruto was supposed to meet Haku, that is, what she had been waiting for so long was finally about to happen. After all, meeting him was another small step towards changing their unenviable future with Zabuza. And in the long term get a deader and get rid of a rather strong, resurrected, and therefore immortal, enemy in the coming war. However, the blonde not only sat and waited for the meeting, she actually became interested in summoning Niken, so time passed quite quickly for her and with visible benefit. Ninja dogs, even in her past future, greatly amazed Naruto, showing themselves to be good bloodhounds, messengers and even detectives. True of all of them, so far she could only talk with Pakun. The gloomy Kurama silently put up with this talkative grumbler, as before with the toads, because, whatever one may say, the summoned animal's extremely useful, especially now, while he himself sits under seal lock and key. Pakun, in addition to his usual chatter, told the blonde a lot of interesting things about some joint techniques and his colleagues. True, while the seal on the cell of the Ninetails was tightly closed, Naruto could only dream of summoning the rest of the Niken and sharing techniques with them. But as Kakashi said when she was still his student, theoretical knowledge cannot be superfluous, so learn, someday it might save your life. Now Naru was simply lying in a clearing flooded with weak morning sun and skillfully pretending to be asleep. Haku, judging by the sun hovering at its zenith, should have already appeared. At least the kunoichi really hoped that this time everything would go exactly according to the same scenario that she vaguely remembered. Yawning sweetly, Naruto tossed and turned slightly and turned to her side, trying to lie down more comfortably, and really began to slowly fall into a doze. You shouldn't sleep here, you'll catch a cold. Someone sharply pulled the kunoichi by the shoulder, tearing him out of the sweet bliss. The girl suddenly opened her eyes and, meeting the bright sunlight, immediately closed her eyes. Here comes your ice boy! Kurama laughed mockingly in her skull. He's not mine! The annoyed girl snorted and carefully opened one eye, getting used to the bright light. Who are you? The blonde asked, meeting the guy's brown eyes. Haku had his long black hair down, and draped over his shoulders was a sleeveless pink kimono with light red edges and small blue swirls that reached down to his ankles. He wore the usual white obi in the form of a bow, and on his legs there was a pair of light brown sandals with dark stripes. I'm just collecting medicinal herbs here, the guy answered softly with a slight smile, watching Naru sit down. Okay, but I apparently dozed off after training yesterday. The girl giggled nervously, ruffling her already disheveled hair at the back of her head. Dead end! The tailed trickster said philosophically after a few seconds of silence. Offer, maybe, help him! He suggested ironically after about 30 seconds of them silently looking at each other. Oh, maybe I can help you, brother? The kunoichi suggested hesitantly, rising to her feet. Do you understand that I'm a guy? He gasped, examining his new acquaintance with curiosity. Well, I'm not an ordinary girl. Proudly straightening up and pushing her bangs away from her forehead, she told Naruto to the laughter of her tailed friend. You, the brunette said in surprise. This headband, are you a ninja? He said, sitting down near a tree. Oh my god, Naru, forget what I said about Kakashi. You and this guy are just a brilliant couple, he said through laughter, feeling in his gut how angry these words made his Jinchuriki. Shut up, fox face. I'll deal with you a little later. She snorted and smiled sweetly at her interlocutor. You're right, I'm a ninja. She nodded and, plopping down next to her, added, When I grow up I will become the strongest shinobi of my village so that everyone knows it. Haku blinked in surprise, disconcerted by such ease in her behavior, but immediately pulled himself together and smiled warmly at her. Great, he took the bait. Now let's lure him over to our side with your cookies. The Ninetales neighed loudly, finding their dialogue extremely funny. Does anyone need this? The guy asked curiously. Or just for yourself, Haku added a little more quietly, but noticing what he thought was the confusion on his interlocutor's face, he laughed quietly. Naruto, at this time, was trying to digest the rather interesting advice of Kurama, who gave it to him, as always, too late. No, Naru, of course, understood that this couldn't be done with cookies, but it was worth trying to come up with something in advance in order to lure the Nuke Nin and his ward from Gato to theirs. Stop laughing. Returning to the real world from her thoughts, the Kunoichi said offendedly, pouting like an evil hamster. And you? Just shut up, the blonde said to her tenant more calmly, realizing that the moment had been lost. Do you have someone who is dear to you? The guy asked affectionately, looking straight into her heavenly eyes. Naru's cheeks involuntarily flushed, her heartbeat quickened, and the faces of Minato, Kakashi, Sasuke, Sakura, Jiraiya appeared before her eyes. All those whom she loved so much. You know, when a person has something that he wants to protect, only then can he become truly strong, he said, and the girl sitting next to her again felt like that child abandoned by everyone, who just recently, for the first time in her life, had something that he could really call his own, friends, a team, a sensei. Now the list of those who were dear to her increased significantly, making Naruto desire even more power to protect them all this time. Yes, the girl finally said, smiling radiantly. I understand this perfectly, brother. You will become a strong ninja, Haku said with a smile as he got to his feet. And we will meet again someday, he said, and turning away, went into the depths of the forest. Fine, the girl shouted back to him. Hey Kurama, why are you quiet? She sang, falling back onto the grass and closing her eyes to open them in her inner world, right in front of a huge cage, behind the bars of which sat a large demon fox. He frowned at the blonde with an offended look and remained stubbornly silent. Kurama, enough already, she snorted as she walked through the thick bars and walked closer to her bijou. You told me to be quiet, so I'm silent. The bijou snapped, but contrary to his words, he offered her one of his tails. Well, and what did you achieve with this? When Naruto sat down, he asked, wanting to understand what exactly this girl was hiding from him, all this time making some grandiose plans of her own. None of what I wanted, spreading her arms, Naruto said in a sing-song voice, but you know, this conversation helped me again understand things that are very important for shinobi and humans. Kurama. Chapter 27, Inari. Naruto, sitting in the middle of the clearing, with the tenacity of a ram, tried to feel all her chakra and release it while summoning the Niken. The whole point of the Kunoichi's indignation was that she absolutely knew her chakra reserve made it possible to summon the entire flock. But for some reason, at the end it was possible to summon only Pakin. This irritated Nara about as much as the jokes and nasty giggling of the fox in her head after each failure of his Jinchuriki. Kurama, probably the only one who knew the true reason for what was happening, was in no hurry to help his friend, preferring to enjoy a free show from the future heroine of Konoha. Not far from the slowly but surely enraged girl, Sasuke was training, who, with the help of a couple of tips from the blonde, was just beginning to be able to run and climb almost to the very top of the tree. And this, to Naruto's surprise, began to put pressure on her in a strange way, because her childhood friend only needed to polish his control, and she In general, the two of them trained, just like in the good old days, when the Uchiha clan was still alive, or maybe, and before, in the girl's past life. By the way, Sakura also wanted to join this sweet couple, but was assigned by Kakashi to accompany Tazuna to the construction site. For by the third day of training she was almost skipping up the tree and could stand on a branch upside down for quite a long time. And of course, thanks to this, the relationship between Naruto and Sakura deteriorated again, because one could not stop making her innocent jokes, and the other never got rid of blind jealousy. Exhaling angrily, the girl once again gathered all her chakra, made the necessary seals and, having bitten through her finger, which had managed to heal after the previous attempt, put her palm to the ground. The circle of the seal grew almost instantly, and white smoke swirled around, announcing that the call was a success. It didn't work out again, Naruto. A slightly squeaky voice grunted from the smoke, which, like this whole situation, the kunoichi was already starting to get angry. Captain Obvious! The Nine-Tails snorted angrily, blazing with scarlet chakra, which caused the water in the kunoichi's inner world to stir. He's not so tired of the situation. The demon honestly considered her comical, and enjoyed the torment of his Jinchuriki, like Pakken himself. Does anyone hate cute little dogs? Or are you just afraid of them, Kurama? The kunoichi blurted out too caustically, releasing a tiny part of her irritation accumulated over all these days onto the tailed one. It looks like, the girl said sadly out loud, hearing the fox snoring angrily in her mind. I was thinking, Naruto, maybe we can call it a day. The dog, who had been called upon probably more than a dozen times that day, responded with a yawn. You're probably right, Pakken, lowering her head so that her eyes covered her hair, the blonde drawled, realizing that tomorrow it would be too late, for the final battle would take place on the bridge. A heavy sigh was heard from the Niken, and then Nera felt him lean on her chest with his small paws and barely perceptibly lick her nose. Don't be upset. You are a Jinchuriki, so ask your beast how to overcome your barrier. The dog chuckled quietly and disappeared with a loud bang, leaving the kunoichi to look in surprise somewhere deep into the darkening forest. What is he talking about? The blonde asked sternly, slightly moving away from what she had heard. Neru, let's go, it's starting to get dark. Sasuke shouted, landing a meter away from his friend, who had frozen like an idol after Pakken left. Naruto, honey, let's talk in the evening. The Nine-Tails drawled peacefully, and even somehow sweetly, hoping that by this time his Jinchuriki would come to his senses and calm down a little. It's just the fact that he, keeping silent about why her problem arose and how to overcome it, didn't promise anything good for Kurama. Look, the Uchiha has already called you. Look how excited he is! The demon fox said quickly, trying to divert her attention. In which he succeeded brilliantly. Okay, but you'll tell me everything tonight, Kurama! The kunoichi snorted and, jumping up sharply, smiled friendly at her best friend, who at that moment felt with his fifth point that she was up to something again. Maybe a little sparring before leaving? The blonde drawled ingratiatingly, looking appraisingly at the rather exhausted and shabby guy, realizing that she now looks no better. It's just that now she needed to throw out all her negative feelings. And what would be better for this than a fight? No jutsu or weapons, only bare skills. With her hands on her hips, the kunoichi shouted out smartly, throwing back her long hair and looking defiantly at the Uchiha. Come on, Naruto! Sasuke chuckled with a grin, getting into a stance. Ah, they're back at last. The first thing Sasuke and Naruto heard when they returned to Tazuna's house. Actually, the bridge builder himself said this, looking at the teenagers leaning on each other due to fatigue. Somehow you are painfully dirty and exhausted. Having carefully examined his guests, the man revealed and, smiling strangely, added, What's wrong with you? The eyes of Sakura, sitting next to her, literally flared with indignation. She clearly caught the humorous and not entirely decent subtext in the words of the builder. Even Kakashi turned and looked at them appraisingly. We trained. Without saying a word, the friends said in unison, which is why the blonde laughed cheerfully, and the brunette chuckled approvingly. I finally made it to the top, the guy said proudly, supporting his friend who was almost falling from laughter. And I can summon Pakken even with my eyes closed. Having finally laughed it off, the blonde slightly nervously revealed the only thing she had achieved in all 6 days. Great! Kakashi, who was watching his amused students with a stern gaze, sparingly praised them. Naruto, Sasuke, starting tomorrow you will also guard Tazuna. The copy ninja immediately gave the order. Eat. The teenagers answered in unison again and sank helplessly onto their chairs. The blonde, not paying attention to the smell of dinner around her and her growling stomach, folded her hands and lowered her head on them, falling into a doze. The Uchiha turned out to be more resilient. He simply leaned his elbows on the table, rested his head on his folded palms and closed his eyes tiredly. Hee. Actually, I'm tired too, the bridge builder laughed, looking at the exhausted teenagers. And he quickly added in a cheerful tone, trying to cheer them up, but the bridge is almost ready. Naruto listened with half an ear to the quiet conversation, occasionally agreeing with someone when she heard her name. Waiting for a meeting with Haku, because of which the blonde had to get up before dawn, a whole day of fruitless attempts to summon someone other than Pakken, and a rather exhausting sparring with Sasuke did their job, causing the kunoichi's brain to slowly disconnect from reality. The only thing that kept the girl on her toes was the suspiciously quiet-tailed one, who, apparently, had been mocking her for the last few days. And, of course, the upcoming preparation for tomorrow's battle with Zabuza and Haku. The girl didn't know if she would be able to pull off what she had in mind. After all, it was almost impossible to convince Momochi that Gato had betrayed him until his partner died, and the businessman himself appeared on the bridge and said so. And this is not to mention the battle with Haku, the cover and the death of the guy at the hands of Kakashi. Suddenly, Nara's sleepy brain felt someone's hostile gaze directed directly at her. Slightly opening her right eye, as Kurama usually did, the blonde languidly looked around to realize that none other than Inari was watching her. He looked with obvious rejection and envy at the same time, and the boy's eyes were full of tears of sadness and despair. This, surprisingly, did not anger her and did not even evoke sympathy in her, but simply irritated. As if she was looking at herself in a past life a pathetic, useless orphan who was persecuted by the entire village. What? Naruto asked tiredly with a little irritation in her voice, looking straight at Inari. May these efforts not help you? Unexpectedly for everyone, the boy shouted, jumping to his feet. No matter how hard you try, Gato's people are still stronger. Continuing to cry, he shouted, leaning his elbows on the table and leaning forward slightly. No matter what you say, no matter how you work, Inari said angrily, glaring at the one who so reminded him of his father's character. The weak always lose anyway. Shocking everyone who was in the dining room, he shouted loudly, through tears. Calm down, little thing, I'm not like you, the kunoichi responded frighteningly quietly and calmly after the boy's hysteria, unexpectedly realizing that the silence of the fox, who usually diffuses such situations with jokes, was beginning to stress her out. Yes, she herself wanted him to shut up, she herself did not want to hear him until the evening, but still, I don't want to be like you. Meanwhile, the boy continued, slowly breaking down into hysterics. You know nothing about our country, you just talk for 3 people. He cried out, bursting into tears, throwing out all his pain and anger at the one who had opened his wounds. What do you even know about me? Inari barked, glaring at his interlocutor. I'm not like you, all you do is clown around. The guy snorted contemptuously right in her face. You are an unfinished clown, and you don't even know what misfortune is. The sound of the click was probably heard by everyone who knew this good-natured and cheerful blonde at least a little. Inari had finally crossed the line of patience when the kunoichi could tolerate his insults and put the brakes on his disrespect. And this meant that now it would explode and the boy would not find it enough. So, are you the star of a classical tragedy? Too much, the girl asked caustically, causing Inari to flinch and stare at her in surprise. Do you shed tears all day long? Naruto asked, grimacing, clearly trying to offend and touch the child's heartstrings with her words. Yes, cry for the rest of your life, you snot-nosed weakling. The kunoichi spat out with undisguised contempt and irritation, looking straight into Inari's face, then snorted and, under Sakura's indignant cries, went to her room. The inner world greeted Naruto with a gloomy, oppressive atmosphere, pressing on its owner from all sides. However, the kunoichi expected about this, because her mood now matched her surroundings. Inari once again managed to pick off what the girl had hidden in her past life, coming to terms with her second eye. Because of this, she again lashed out at the child, saying a bunch of rude things to him, instead of talking calmly, as she had originally planned to do. Exhaling heavily to bring her feelings back to normal a little, the blonde slowly walked towards the golden cage of her tailed beast breaking through the darkness. She knew how much she hated Kurama when her inner world was in such a state, so she felt guilty before her friend in advance. Naru had already forgotten that the Nine-Tails himself had done something wrong. Approaching the cage, the kunoichi carefully walked through the thick bars and stood opposite her friend, expecting his indignation at the local atmosphere. Kurama also silently looked at his friend in anticipation, scolding her for the prank that had gone on for too long. In general, none of them was in a hurry to start a conversation, further escalating the surrounding situation. Sorry, finally giving in under what she thought was Kurama's stern gaze, Naruto said. I really tried not to react. She spoke calmly, but was interrupted by a sharply coughing tailed beast. Naru, I was thinking. The fox responded with a laugh, realizing that it seemed that his punishment was being cancelled. At least it would not be as severe as it could have been. Don't pay attention. You, my dear, don't know how to sulk for long, so I'll tolerate a slightly gloomy situation, he grinned, presenting one of his tails to his surprised Jinchuriki. But I thought you didn't like it when it's like this here. Circling the room with her hands, Naruto blurted out, looking at her tenant with all his eyes. You're right, I don't like it, but I deserve it, because I went a little overboard with the prank of my Jinchuriki. The Nine-Tails grinned, killing two birds with one stone. The blonde blinked slightly thoughtfully, then frowned, and then simply waved her hand, sitting down on the tail offered to her. So that's the thing. Fox, you muzzle! She snorted, spitting on all her grievances and irritation. How can I overcome my barrier? Quoting Pakun's words, the kunoichi asked, becoming more serious. This flea guy said it right, why you can't use all your chakra, it's a kind of barrier, Kurama spoke in a mentoring tone, just like before, when in the evenings he taught her various manipulations with chakra. Your chakra reserve, like that of most representatives of the Uzumaki clan, is large, and it is quite unique, Naruto, but now, while my seal is completely intact, most of this reserve is spent on its maintenance, said the tailed one, relaxingly lying down opposite the girl and closing his eyes. Only in stressful situations is it used to its fullest, so at such moments my chakra breaks through the seal. For example, when you fought with Mizuki or during the fight with Zabuza. Yes, even in my past, when I first broke out, it happened because of the death of your Sharingan-bearing friend, when you yourself were almost at the limit, he finished thoughtfully. So until Jiraiya loosens the seal, I won't be able to use not only yours, but all my chakra? The kunoichi asked in surprise, staring in disbelief at the Nine-Tails pretending to be asleep. Exactly. The fox laughed ironically, returning to his usual trickster state. But you have to admit, there's only a little time left to wait, he said with a wide smile, winked with his huge yellow eye and closed it again. Well, yes, a little bit, Naruto snorted. By the way, Naru, are you sure that tomorrow you want to do everything exactly as we decided? Opening his eye again, the Nine-Tails asked, watching the slightly grimaced face of his Jinchuriki. We've already talked about this, Kurama. This is the only option to reach an amicable agreement with them. The blonde responded sharply, rising from her friend's tail. Are you absolutely sure that this time I will remain conscious? Smoothing out her black skirt, she asked casually, trying not to focus on her concern. I'm sure, Naru, I'm sure. The tailed one snorted. But if anything, I remember the plan from A to Z. The tailed one laughed caustically under the angry gaze of his Jinchuriki. Okay, I'll go, I still have to prepare the stamps, the blonde said to the still laughing fox, and walked out of the cage. The sun slowly filled the small room with its warmth and bright morning light. Naruto, muttering something sleepily, turned over on her side and, throwing off the stuffy blanket, crawled off the sweat-damp futon. Somewhere in the girl's mind, Kurama was yawning, further inclining her Jinchuriki to the desire to fall back on the futon and sleep for a few more hours. But to the great regret of the blonde, who was given a legal day off today, she had more things to do today than the Hokage himself. After all, it was this day that Zabuza chose for his enchanting return from the dead. Well, I couldn't wait another day, the girl muttered, slowly taking off her pajamas that were stuck to her skin. Come on, for once there's something fun coming up, Kurama responded quite cheerfully to her muttering. The girl only snorted in response, and throwing her striped pajamas onto the disassembled futon, climbed into an orange, shabby jumpsuit, which had already become too small for her in some places. Putting a hair tie on her hand, the blonde grabbed a comb and slowly trudged towards the kitchen, simultaneously tearing apart her golden curls, tangled after sleep. Naruto didn't see the point in rushing, anyway. After leaving, she still had to sit in ambush, waiting for two unfinished thugs of Gato. Good morning, Tsunami, Inari, where is everyone? Yawning, the girl asked, leaning through the open doors, tying her hair in a tight high ponytail as she walked, which she usually did not do, preferring to leave it loose. But in battle, Naru's gorgeous long hair most often got in the way, got into his eyes and simply clung to all the ledges, branches and even to other shinobi. Therefore, even in her past life, before battles, she always tied them in a bun or a tight ponytail. Increase your enthusiasm, Kurama drawled ironically, reminding her that she was a little out of her role. Good morning, Naruto. Sensei said that you need to rest. The woman smiled softly at her, looking up from her knitting. The boy nodded embarrassedly and turned away from the kunoichi, apparently still not moving away from her yesterday's words. Enthusiasm, you say? The blonde chuckled, stretching her lips into a wide, playful smile. I knew it, I knew it! The girl suddenly started up and began to wail, heading towards the exit like a bullet. They left without me. She shouted to the laughter of her bijou and flew out of the bridge builder's house, shouting one last time, I ran away. I think they think you're sick now. The Ninetails wheezed through laughter, while his Jinchuriki, also laughing, ran on the first space flight to the forest, where she planned to hide until Gato's thugs arrived. However, before she had time to reach the first trees, two men with swords on their belts already appeared on the horizon, a little further from her. They were talking noisily about something and laughing, heading straight towards Tazuna's house, while keeping their hands on the hilts of their swords. That's it! The blonde hissed out loud, abruptly losing all her good humor. You could just stay in the house. Turning around, she said. Do you still have to wait, or do you want to destroy this whole little house? The Ninetails drawled with undisguised irony to the silent consent of the kunoichi. They both knew very well that now neither Tsunami nor Inari was in danger, but at the same time, now was a very important moment for the boy to realize his inner strength and courage. That's why Naruto wanted to wait until about the same moment to magically intervene in what was happening. Meanwhile, two swordsmen reached the front door, but instead of opening it, they smashed the wooden partition into pieces and disappeared into the room. Naruto instinctively jerked towards the building, but pulled herself together in time, realizing that if she now saves mother and son, it is not a fact that Inari will go to gather people against Gato. And without their help, they will end up in extremely difficult times. Screams were heard in the distance, and those two men came out of Tazuna's house, leading the bridge builder's daughter under escort. Look, so proud! The tailed one said approvingly, looking at the upturned chin, royal posture and impenetrable face of the woman, completely ignoring the words and chuckles of her captors. This cannot be taken away from her, the blonde responded, shaking her head in agreement, and taking a kunai from her pouch, threw it so that when moving she would be as close as possible to this trio. Stop! A child's cry spread throughout the entire area, and after the people who left the house, Inari jumped out of the house. Son! Having lost her mask, the woman cried out in fear. Ah, this little thing again! One of the men grinned. Shall we finish it? Yeah! The second snorted, knocking out the mother with a sharp blow of his hand, who was already ready to rush and protect her son with her body. "Let me go! Let my mother go!" the child shouted and rushed towards the swordsman. At the same moment, Naruto moved with the help of the Thunder God's technique to her kunai, blocking the boy's path, and picking him up in her arms, disappeared again. The swordsman, who managed to lunge, cut only the log used by the kunoichi for the replacement technique. "Great performance, Naruto!" Kurama roared approvingly, already anticipating the upcoming meeting with Haku and, albeit imaginary, temporary freedom from the seal. "Substitution jutsu?" one of the men said in surprise, peering stupidly at the chopped log. "Sorry for the delay, but the hero always arrives at the last minute." Smiling widely, the girl said to the frightened and surprised boy, who clung to her like a life preserver, carefully placing the unconscious Tsunami on the log floor. "Naruto," was all he could squeeze out. "Praise him, or something. Otherwise it won't come off," the tailed one drawled sarcastically, watching her fruitless attempts to unhook the boy from her. "Well done, Inari, you distracted them and I was able to save your mother." Showing him a thumbs up, still smiling, the blonde shouted and, sharply jerking the child, placed him on his feet next to the lying mother. "Look who came to us," one of the men chuckled mockingly. "One of Tazanov's loser shinobis," he said arrogantly, but was completely ignored by the girl. "Can you handle them?" the boy asked in fear, looking at the swordsman. "Doubts us? Come on, show him who Naruto Namikaze is." Kurama chuckled to the approving chuckle of his Jinchuriki. "Certainly." Spinning a pair of shuriken on her fingers, the kunoichi said encouragingly and, turning to her opponents, smiled frighteningly, at the same time throwing a weapon at them. "Heh! You can't take us with this." Having fought off the shells, the men shouted and rushed to attack, while Naruto herself simply stood and smiled. "Idiots," she said, barely audible, under the growl of the nine-tailed fox. The next second, two swordsmen were stunned by her shadow clones with a kick from behind. Chapter 28, Ambush. All the way to their temporary base, Haku thought about the sunny blonde he liked, whom he met quite by chance in the forest, collecting herbs to treat Zabuza. In fact, he noticed her even during their first meeting, when he was taking the body of his dead target from the battlefield. This girl was the only one of all, besides the famous copy ninja, who managed to attract his attention. With his concentration, fortitude, endurance, and abilities, completely unusual, albeit for a shinobi, but still just a child. This blonde was not at all afraid of even the unexpected appearance of a stranger in a mask, while acting as if she knew who he was and why he had come. With this, she literally forced Haku to notice and remember herself back in that day. The other two genin looked, to put it mildly, not very presentable against her background, because they were the most ordinary newcomers. And it was not at all about their appearance or abilities, which, by the way, only the dark-haired guy showed well. No, the problem with these two lay in their views, behavior, and facial expressions, unlike the blonde, who clearly made it clear to everyone around them how scared and shocked they were by what was happening. So today, for the first time in his life, Haku regretted that he couldn't truly make friends with someone. After all, this girl was a truly interesting person. Contrary to her behavior during the battle, where she showed herself to be a real shinobi, she turned out to be bright, lively, extraordinary, and incredibly friendly. This was an extremely unusual combination for a ninja, more typical of experienced shinobi who have been in more than one mess and killed more than one person, who have experienced a lot, and most importantly, have come to terms with their craft. That is why at first Haku had the opinion that this girl was exactly the same as himself, a simple instrument of someone who was infinitely dear to her heart. But the behavior of this blonde when they met in the forest completely changed his first impression of her. Therefore, returning back to Gato's base, the guy, being somewhere far away in his thoughts revolving around this unusual girl, changed Zabuza's bandages, applying them to the wounds the herbs he had just collected. And finally, having come to some conclusion, he looked at Momochi, who, as it turned out, had been staring at his foundling with a stern gaze for the last few tens of minutes. Zabuza, I wanted to ask you, the guy spoke, stuttering slightly, quickly looking away to the window, behind which it was slowly beginning to get dark. And he didn't even notice that so much time had passed. For the first time in recent years he was completely immersed in himself. What exactly? Momochi responded rudely, but at the same time without hiding his curiosity, probably hiding even from himself behind these emotions his excitement for the guy. In the end, Haku was his partner, whom he was counting on during tomorrow's ambush, and if it was worrying that this could affect the result of their mission, for which Gato promised to pay a decent amount. That blonde shinobi of the Leaf Village, who is she? Haku asked quietly, continuing to look out the window, so he didn't even notice how his interlocutor grinned with his lips, remembering the one his partner was talking about. Are you talking about that impudent girl? Zabuza asked mockingly, which is why the guy finally decided to look at him. The man, smiling strangely, closed his eyes and leaned back on the sofa, where he sat rather imposingly. She's not just a shinobi, Haku Shiheim, Momochi said in a satisfied tone, surprising the guy, because the last time he spoke in such a tone was when talking about his sword. This girl, Naruto Namikaze, is the daughter of the Hokage. For her age she is even too strong and cunning, and also a master of seals, he drawled, remembering her behavior and actions during their battle with the copy ninja. And judging by what she saw, she is not afraid to kill, he continued to say and, sharply lowering his gaze to the guy, smiling broadly, added. And this impudent girl is already beautiful. In general, in the future if she lives, Naruto will become a damn dangerous kunoichi. But tomorrow, the guy spoke, but immediately bit his tongue, not knowing what exactly he wanted to say. Or ask? For he understood perfectly well that in any case they would have to clash with the Leaf Shinobi tomorrow, and this time one of them would definitely not return home alive. Haku understood and accepted this, because he was ready to do anything for the sake of the one who saved him, for he was just a tool of Zabuza. Nah. Tomorrow this one will most likely die, the man said without a smile, instantly becoming more serious and gloomy. A heavy silence hung in the room. Apparently, neither Momochi nor his partner wanted the death of this strange, but undoubtedly interesting blonde. True, they didn't want this for completely different reasons. The first wanted to see what this impudent woman would be like in 5 to 10 years, the second simply liked her as a person. This is probably why it was a complete surprise for them that something jumped into the window through which Haku had just recently been looking, then a small dark brown with a deep blue spot. At that same second, Zabuza, with a lightning-quick movement, released his sword, taking a stance. Haku bent down slightly, with a slight movement of his wrist, shook several needles into his palm and prepared to attack. All this happened in a matter of moments, so as soon as what jumped landed on the floor in the far dark corner, it immediately found itself under the gun of 2 strong shinobi. However, as soon as this happened, the Nukenin of the village of Mist relaxed a little, because what jumped through the window turned out to be a dog in a blue vest with some kind of symbol. Hush, hush, boys, I'm just a cute dog. The dog squeaked, looking at the wary shinobi who continued to point their weapons at him, still remaining in the shadows. Who are you? Zabuza asked dryly, gesturing for Haku to put his weapon away and lowering his massive sword himself. My name is Pakin. After looking around slightly, the dog said squeaky, clearly wary of his interlocutors. He slowly walked out into the dim light, allowing them to finally see the hidden Leaf Village forehead protector on his head. I am a Niken of the Hataki clan, and today I am acting as a simple messenger, he said, and in one deft movement he pulled out an envelope hidden in the bosom of his vest. Copy ninja messenger? Momochi said, grinning widely, and sat down again imposingly on the sofa. By the way, how did he get up? Neither Haku nor Pakin noticed. So Kakashi's Sharingan knows about this place? He laughed, contrary to his words, becoming more tense. But instead of an attack or an ambush, he sent a messenger. It was not him, but Naruto Namikaze. Again drawing attention to himself, the dog stretched out, placing the letter on the floor in front of him. I promised to convey this and her request for silence. Turning back to the window, The dog squeaked and just as quickly jumped back out the window, wanting to leave this inhospitable place as soon as possible. What a damn thing. Where did I find out? Momochi laughed at all this, watching Haku pick up the letter left by the Niken. Kakashi slowly walked behind everyone along the forest road towards the almost completed bridge, enjoying the good weather and temporary respite. Walking ahead, Tazuna told Sasuke and Sakura about various funny incidents from his long life, completely capturing the attention of the teenagers with his tales. Naruto, being the most violent and stubborn one, decided to give Hatake a rest today, because this girl, as before, now did not know the limits. When he was working as a mentor to the blonde in front of the academy, Kakashi watched more than once as Nara practiced, not paying attention to fatigue and chakra depletion, until she did it just perfectly. Well, or almost perfectly. And in the 8 years since she entered the Shinobi Academy, practically nothing has changed. This stubborn blonde summoned the unfortunate Pakken more times in a few days than Kakashi himself did in the entire last year, trying to do something that she was simply unable to do because of the seal holding back the tailed beast. The funny thing is, Naruto knew this, but still, with the tenacity of a ram, she tried to summon, if not the entire flock, then at least someone besides Pakken. That is why Kakashi decided to give her an unscheduled mandatory day off today, as he had done before. Because he knew if this girl is not stopped by force, she will simply collapse from exhaustion, as happened a couple of times in childhood. Hatake, barely noticeable through a thick mask, sincerely smiled at his memories of a quiet, peaceful life with baby Naru and Minato, who practically replaced Tsukumo after the death of his father. These memories warmed his wounded heart, allowing him to forget at least for a while about who he was and what he had done. However, the thought that he was in love with the one whom he had previously considered almost his sister left a strange aftertaste. No, not at all unpleasant, but rather mocking, like the girl herself, who had been repeating since childhood that she would become his wife. It was only after a few minutes that all carefree thoughts flew out of the copy ninja's head, and the smile automatically slipped from his face, giving way to a serious mask. They were approaching the bridge, where workers were already supposed to be working, but, contrary to Kakashi's expectations, there was deathly silence all around. Even the singing of birds enjoying the warm day, which had been following them throughout their entire journey, imperceptibly fell silent, drowning in a resounding, frightening silence. Sharply ahead of the carefree children ahead, who already seemed to have forgotten that they were on a mission, and the bridge builder, Hatake stepped forward, scanning the surrounding space, for some reason shrouded in dense white fog. Snorting in annoyance at having to do like Naruto, so accurately determined the enemy's position last time even through his jutsu, he couldn't, Kakashi, with a release of chakra, cleared the patch of the unfinished bridge where the workers were supposed to be, and opened up a view of a truly terrible picture. About a dozen people, the workers who built the bridge with Tazuna, all stained with their own blood, lay unconscious on the concrete floor, possibly and completely dead. What the? Shouted the bridge builder, running slightly forward, which, in Hatake's humble opinion, he shouldn't have done. Suddenly, one of the workers wheezed, spitting blood onto the white concrete, and Tazuna immediately rushed to his acquaintance, kneeling next to him in an attempt to help. What? What happened? He asked worriedly, carefully helping the man to rise slightly so that he would not choke on his own blood. Damon, through wheezing, the worker barely audibly squeezed out, struggling with his eyes closing, and sharply went limp. The copy ninja listened warily, gesturing for his students to take a seat near their client, who was still trying to revive the man. The bridge patch began to be covered in dense white fog again. Tazuna, finally leaving his body alone, rose to his feet, finding himself, like last time, surrounded by Team Number 7. Only this time Hatake himself stood in front of him, and not Naruto. Everyone get ready! The copy ninja loudly ordered, sensing the enemy's rapid approach. This time there were two of them, one of which was most definitely Zabuza Momochi. His charges, almost instantly armed with kunai, prepared to defend themselves. Hatake exhaled carefully, concentrating on the enemy's movements, because without Nara's barrier they were in full view for him. Long time no see, Kakashi. The muffled voice of the Nuke Nin drawled mockingly from somewhere far away, forcing his victims to tense their whole bodies. And you, I see, are still babysitting these kids? Chuckled a voice from a completely different direction. However, the copy ninja did not pay any attention to this change, clearly sensing the direction from which to expect the attack. Look, that boy is shaking, poor thing. Zabuza laughed almost at the shinobi's ear, instantly dissolving into the cover of fog. But that blonde girl is not there. What a pity, I would like to play with her. Well, what can you do, you'll have to wait. His voice came out a little clearer now, or rather the voice of his clone approaching the shinobi of the Hidden Leaf Village. The next second, Momochi's face appeared in front of Sasuke, Sakura and Kakashi, trying to scare them. It's a shiver of impatience. The Uchiha chuckled in the man's face, feeling fear flare up inside him for his childhood friend, who was left sleeping in the bridge builder's house. He still remembered how greasily he looked at that freak Naruto, remembered his vile words, as well as the fact that he could not protect her in any way, missing all the blows of this demon, ultimately forcing Nara to defend herself. Sasuke always knew that his girlfriend was stronger than him. He knew that she was that same genius born once in a generation. But only at the very moment when she fell into his hands under the guise of Fuma Shuriken, did he realize that he was hopelessly behind. With his dreams of revenge on the murderers of his parents and clan, he did not notice how pathetic he was, for he was unable to protect even the one who was like his little sister. Actually, the fact that Naruto was only more than 2 months younger than him, he little concerned. Therefore, once again hearing Zabuza's words about Naruto, the guy literally felt hatred for this man boiling inside him. Take action, Sasuke, Kakashi said softly with a smile, feeling a literally tangible lust for murder from the calmest of his charges. However, Hatake himself was not far from this state, fully understanding why the younger Uchiha violated one of the main rules of shinobi: always stay cool. The guy, just hearing the words of his sensei, literally cut 3 water clones of Zabuza with his kunai with a few quick and precise movements. Along with the doubles, the fog also disappeared, revealing the Leaf Shinobi's view of a pair of Nuke Nin of the Mist. He dealt with my clones, Momochi chuckled sarcastically, examining the stern face of the guy opposite. Looks like the baby has gotten stronger. He drawled ironically, hinting at his complete failure as a ninja during their last meeting. A worthy opponent, right, Haku? The Nuke Nin said in a more serious tone, addressing his partner in the ninja hunter mask. Looks like I wasn't mistaken. Kakashi responded dryly, slightly rudely, looking at their opponents, especially lingering his gaze on the one who looked to be the same age as his subordinates. This masked guy. So he really is an ally of Zabuza, said the copy ninja, hearing Tazuna quietly gasp behind him, admitting that the shinobi was right. Hey, take off your mask, you coward! Sakura said rudely, not hiding her anger directed at the hunter Nin, which, in Hataki's opinion, was already unnecessary, at least in this situation. Although, he himself agreed with her on something, the fact that these two appeared literally a couple of days before the completion of construction, irritated. I'll deal with him. Sasuke chuckled, stepping forward a little. This bastard in a mask deceived us. The pink-haired girl immediately shouted out in agreement, supporting her teammate Sasuke, you are the best. Slightly going too far with enthusiasm, Haruno continued, for some reason adding again, but in a more gentle tone, Sasuke, you are the best. Impressive, that's all the guy in the mask said, in a high melodious voice, devoid of any emotion. Of course, water clones have only 1/10 of the strength of the original, he explained slightly condescendingly, as it might seem, mocking the Uchiha. However, Haku really wanted to praise him, seeing real progress since their last meeting, so he added, still impressive. But we have already received the first advantage. Zabuza dryly interrupted the guy who was clearly ready to answer something caustic to his partner. Forward. Haku, as in their last meeting, evaporated in a strong whirlwind, reminiscent of a mini tornado, appearing next to Sasuke, who was standing slightly ahead. The Uchiha, not expecting this, hesitated slightly and barely avoided the hunter's attack, parrying the blow of Haku's needles with his kunai. Meanwhile, Kakashi, having given the order to Sakura to guard Tazuna and leaving the hunter Nin on Sasuke, who, apparently, was not inferior to him in strength, rushed to Momochi. It was only at that moment, when he was already close to his goal, that the guy opposing the Uchiha began to make seals with one hand. Hatake had never seen anything like this in his life, let alone a boy who had recently graduated from the Shinobi Academy. And it was annoying, as was what happened after that, Hijitsu. Sensatsu Suisho, Haku said clearly, finally knocking off Sasuke's hand with the kunai, and immediately grabbed her wrist with his other hand. Meanwhile, around the guys, the water from which Zabuza's water clones had previously consisted began to rise and crystallize into ice needles. Kakashi watched in horror as thousands of needles rushed towards the guy he had known since infancy, while he himself could not even move out of their flight path, held by the hunter Nin. Hatake himself also did not have time to save him, even if he remained standing in the same place. Somewhere to the side, Sakura's frightened scream was heard, and then the ice needles collided in the place where the younger Uchiha stood, allowing Haku, who had jumped away a second before, to freedom. He, as if surprised by something, looked around and, having parried the shuriken from Sasuke, who had also managed to jumped away from the place where the needles collided, searching with his eyes for his opponent. "How leisurely you are," Sasuke chuckled, finding himself right behind his opponent. "Now try to dodge." Leaning slightly towards his opponent's ear, he drawled. With a sharp and strong blow, a fist with a kunai clutched in it flew straight into the enemy's face. The hunter Nin leaned back slightly and stopped his hand, grabbing his wrist. However, the Uchiha was not as simple as it seemed at first glance. With a smooth movement of his wrist, he sent the kunai straight into his opponent's mask, forcing him to duck, because the attack itself was too weak for real attempts to kill. Both guys understood this. And as soon as Haku was level with Sasuke's legs, he swung and sent him flying straight to the feet of Zabuza, who watched in disbelief as his partner was outpaced. "Looks like I'll be quicker after all," the Uchiha said with a chuckle, at that moment reminding Hatake of his childhood friend more than ever. "Children are so easy to underestimate, right?" Kakashi chuckled, looking mockingly at the angry Momochi. "Sasuke the best graduate of this year," the man said, nodding towards the guy. "Sakura is smarter than everyone in her class," pointing to the embarrassed girl, he continued. "Well, the third. The most restless and noisy shinobi of the village, who can infuriate anyone." He grinned, remembering everything that she did before entering the academy. However, what Naru did after was already heard by the whole village. But with all this, she is probably the best genin in our village. Zabuza only laughed at these words, causing questioning glances from the shinobi of the Leaf Village. "Haku, do you understand everything?" Abruptly stopping his laughter, Momochi turned to his partner, still sitting on the ground in front of Sasuke. "If this continues, we won't be able to deal with them," he said evenly, watching the guy rise to his feet. Hatake instinctively sensed a catch in all the madness happening around him, but standing at a distance from the guys, he could not understand what exactly this catch was. "Yes," drawled the ninja hunter, from whom there was a whiff of some kind of cold. "This cannot be allowed," the guy said, and, looking down, began to quickly make seals, this time using both hands, and when he finished, he sharply looked at Sasuke and shouted, "Hijitsu Meikyo Hayashi!" Naruto, using the technique of the God of Thunder, rushed through the forest of the Land of Waves in a blurry yellow blur. A couple of days before, the girls specially walked along the path from Tazuna's house to the bridge, which in the future would bear her name, and put her marks on some trees. There was no way she was going to be late there, because if that happened, too many people could die who, in the grand scheme of things, shouldn't even be fighting. Not because of the greed of some vile bastard who thinks he's a king. However, now the girl was thinking a little about something else, trying to distract herself from the upcoming battle and the heavy thoughts pressing on her consciousness like a concrete slab. Inori thanked her and apologized for his insults, calling her a heroine. It turned out that evening Kakashi talked to him, talking about her life, which, although not the same as last time, was still full of misunderstanding, pain, and fear. The boy said that this helped him understand that in any difficult you need to believe in your life situation and do everything possible, and then everything will definitely change for the better. Inari, again, thanks to them, from a downtrodden crybaby, afraid, perhaps, even to live, in one morning turned into a strong, brave guy, ready to defend what is dear to him until his last breath. This strangely encouraged the kunoichi, pulling her out of the protracted depression into which she had slipped when she found herself in the land of waves. "RR, can you feel it, Naru?" Kurama's excited voice suddenly rang out in her head, causing the kunoichi to almost plow through a couple of meters of undergrowth with her nose. Echoes of aggressive chakra, the smell of blood and sweat, a feeling of fear, excitement, and anticipation. He growled so that Naruto felt her head splitting in two for several long seconds. Although this roar finally helped her to finally emerge from the heap of overwhelming thoughts and feelings. "Now that you mentioned it, I felt it," the girl answered with a wide smile, partly understanding the feelings of the tailed one, for whom a good battle was akin to his favorite entertainment. Kurama had not gone outside for so long, had not used his powers to the maximum, had not felt at least imaginary freedom for so long. And all because of her stupidity and unwillingness to listen to the advice of loved ones. This is probably why the girl, having the opportunity to do without the tailed cover, which was dangerous primarily for her own body, which was subjected to colossal stress, nevertheless decided to follow almost the same path as last time. In a dangerous way, where Sasuke will have to awaken his Sharingan, she weakened the father's seal, and Sakura, albeit temporarily, understand what it's like losing a loved one. "Look, this kid has already started!" The Ninetales grinned sarcastically as Naruto landed at the final point of her little journey. Namely a branch from which a piece of the bridge was clearly visible, on which Sasuke and Haku and Kakashi and Zabuza were now fighting. "After all, this boy's demonic ice mirror technique is simply amazing!" The tailed one whistled, looking through the eyes of his Jinchuriki at how, under the dome of mirrors, Sasuke was wounded over and over again by dozens of small sharp needles. "That's for sure," the kunoichi responded in agreement, just at the moment when Sakura tried to jump to attack Haku with a kunai. If Itachi had been in her place, perhaps such an attack would have passed, but now it looked at least funny. Although in her place the blonde would have rushed into the thick of things, spitting on her life and the life of their customer, just to protect her friend. However, that's exactly what she was going to do again, so completely so, forward? Naru asked, seeing Haku effortlessly catch the Pinkette's kunai. "Go Naru!" The tailed trickster growled in her inner world in anticipation of a good battle. "Let's show them all who the Jinchuriki of the nine-tailed fox is," he shouted with a laugh, and the girl, jumping from the branch, threw a shuriken at the hesitant guy and landed clearly between Zabuza and the dome of ice mirrors. Haku, still unable to react to the sudden attack, fell onto the concrete, while the others stared in surprise at the proud blonde with long golden hair gathered in a high ponytail and blue eyes shining with determination. She winked mockingly at Zabuza, blew a kiss to Kakashi, and smiled widely. "Naruto Namikaze is finally here!" The blonde loudly informed everyone, hearing heavy sighs coming from all sides, mixed with giggles and sighs of relief. Chapter 29, Communication. "Yeah, well, here I come," the blonde loudly announced, while thick white smoke from the sabers slowly dissipated around her. The main character always appears at the last moment, and always wins. "Perky," the girl shouted, emphasizing the last word, and extended her clenched fist forward. But from Kakashi's sour expression and Sasuke's face peering through the icy prison of mirrors, it immediately became clear what exactly they thought about her incredibly spectacular appearance. On Hataki's gloomy face one could clearly read the question. What kind of circus is this? Did she arrange it here? And he also calls himself a shinobi. However, Sakura, despite the skepticism of the commander and teammate, and Tazuna were sincerely glad of her arrival, hoping that the blonde would certainly help the Uchiha cope with the ninja hunter. "God, Naruto, just look at these faces!" The Ninetales immediately exploded with laughter in her head, forcing her Jinchuriki to once again suppress the smile that was creeping onto her face by force of will. Whatever one may say, This spectacle was indeed quite comical, collecting probably all the emotions that a person's face could convey: anger, joy, anticipation, hopelessness, surprise, fear, and admiration. Forget is just the star of the collection. You can't tell right away whether he's happy, upset, or doesn't give a damn about what's happening. The fox demon laughed, forcing the kunoichi to glance briefly at the Nukanen's face covered with bandages. And in her opinion, he was rather upset by her appearance, but at the same time, a certain impatience and anticipation was clearly felt in the man's gaze. And Kakashi is really scared, angry, and, in my opinion, even now he's a little jealous of you, Kurama drawled sarcastically, distracting his Jinchuriki from the pensive contemplation of Momochi. Only, at the same second when Naruto looked at Kakashi, filled to the brim with a variety of bright feelings, the dark eye of her beloved, about 5 Zabuza's shuriken flew in her direction. Crap! Kakashi somehow desperately shouted, and then, in fear, jerked towards his ward. Only now, knowing full well that he still wouldn't have time to do anything, the man, by force of will, forced himself to stay in place, hoping for a miracle. Hatake knew that he was the only obstacle between Tazuna and the Nukenin of Mist Village. And if he had jerked towards Naruto, then Sakura, who was simply unable to resist the Jounin, and moreover, the bridge builder corpses. Therefore, the only thing Kakashi could do now, with eyes widened in fear, looking at the blonde who is still smiling at him. Naruto, noticing the shells, with a brave smile, quickly took out a kunai and stood in a stance, for the sake of appearance preparing to repel them, because she knew for sure that this time Haku would cover her. Are you ready, Naru? Kurama asked without his mockery, when 1/2 meter from the kunoichi the needles were knocked down by Zabuza's shuriken, and the girl herself involuntarily shuddered and looked in feigned surprise at the guy in the mask. It still seems to me that this whole plan is too risky. This time everything could have been resolved with much less bloodshed, the tailed one said tiredly, perfectly understanding the reasons for such an act of his Jinchuriki, but still not approving of her excessive risk. Haku, what's the matter? Dry Momochi drawled, looking from under his brows at his partner, who had just protected their enemy. However, given the fact that last evening this girl sent Haku a personal letter, after reading which the guide became somehow thoughtful and flatly refused to show him its contents, Zabuza was sure that all this was not just like that. After all, this was the first time the guide disobeyed his request, which, in fact, was a direct order. I know there were options that would have made our lives much easier, Kurama. Meanwhile, the girl grinned sadly to herself, silently, like everyone else, watching the conversation of the Nukanins. On the very first day, using my undermode of the sage, I could find and kill Gato. But, she continued to speak quite calmly, not understanding why she was once again explaining to the fox, why she wanted to bring it all to such a conclusion. Sasuke must now awaken his Sharingan, and Sakura must realize the severity of the loss of a loved one. And this should happen precisely before the Chunin exam, since these two will have to prove themselves to be true shinobi, the blonde said hotly, closing her eyes for a second. And in the end, I can't help but try to help Kakashi become a little stronger before the upcoming war. Naruto added too quietly for herself, lowering her head, as she understood too well what he would have to experience for this. Zabuza, let me deal with them myself. A minute later, the guy responded slightly confusedly, turning his masked face to his partner. And the kunoichi sharply raised her head and looked at Haku in surprise, because he finally raised his voice in front of her, which was the preconditioned signal for the start of action for his and Kurama's plan. Come on, I understand perfectly well, Naruto. The tailed beast drawled in a serious tone, which was not at all characteristic of him, responding almost simultaneously with the guy in the porcelain mask. You don't want me to interfere, do you, Haku? Hard Momochi grinned, once again realizing that this boy was too kind for a shinobi. You're still just as soft. He snorted contemptuously, making it clear to the guy what he thought about this trait of his. But still, he decided not to interfere with his partner, because in some way he understood him. Thank you, the now adult kunoichi in the body of a 13-year-old teenager said, barely audible, gratefully. Just try not to die before I capture your body. The Nine-Tails laughed sarcastically. And keep an eye on your Sharingan-bearing friend, because I simply won't survive another hysteria because of these vile Uchihas played by you. Kurama drawled with his usual irony, returning to his usual state of an annoying trickster, and added with an anticipatory chuckle. Go ahead, Naru, your exit. Agreed. Only you. Don't overdo it and don't break Dad's seal completely. Remember, it only needs to be broken a little. Exhaling, the blonde said mockingly, trying not to think about what was coming, and took an uncertain step closer to the guy in the mask. It's you, brother? So that only Haku could hear her, the girl said in a whisper, attracting the attention of the slightly twitching guy, clearly not expecting to be discovered. Naruto, not seeing any aggression on his part, under the surprised glances of everyone present, slowly and somehow hesitantly walked closer to her enemy, and carefully extended her hand, touching the fabric holding the mask on his face. Sliding smoothly, the porcelain touched the concrete with a characteristic crack and the white mask of the ninja hunter split in two. Why do you? Naruto said hysterically, as if she really didn't expect to see his face under the mask. Excellently played! The tailed beast from the prompter's booth applauded her contentedly, causing the blonde's heart to clench painfully, since Haku at that moment looked somehow too broken. It doesn't matter anymore because you won't back down, and I have to do what Zabuza wants. The guy responded in a dead voice, looking up at Naruto's pure and innocent blue eyes. I'm just his tool, so... He slowly walked past the frozen statue of the girl, heading towards the prison of mirrors, throwing her a last word, wait here while I deal with him. Naruto snorted angrily, literally merging her voice with the roar of her inner demon. She expected a slightly different reaction from the guy when his identity was revealed. However, the girl has already made her first move, which should make her life a little easier in the future. Or rather, the moment when Kurama, having captured her body, will fight with him. The blonde quickly looked around, holding her gaze for a second at Kakashi, who was surprised by what had happened, and without hesitation, slipped into a cage of demonic ice mirrors. Sasuke, like last time, sat all wounded in its very center, apparently considering the option of attacking Haku from the inside and outside at the same time. Therefore, seeing the broadly smiling face of his childhood friend in front of him, the guy literally choked on the air with indignation. Hey, I came to save you! Naruto sang good-naturedly as she landed on her haunches next to the Uchiha. What, are you completely? Sasuke hissed angrily in response to her benevolent tone, piercing the blonde with an indignant gaze. However, there was clearly a strong concern for his friend in his voice, which slightly smoothed out the overall impression. Is your head sticking out just for decoration? Why did you go inside? Almost turning to a scream, he blurted out, probably for the first time in this life raising his voice at Naruto. Although, to be honest, if she were in his place, she would have done the same thing, especially considering the fact that climbing inside the cage was really quite stupid. Unless, of course, you prepared for this in advance. Well, or have already had a similar experience before. What a grouch! Does he still doubt our abilities? Angrily growled in response to the rude words of the younger Uchiha Kurama, literally radiating negative energy. Devil! The girl hissed at all this, without particularly thinking about which of her two interlocutors she was addressing. That's it, I don't care. You are absolute! The kunoichi snapped irritably, this time clearly talking to Sasuke. Whatever one may say, such treatment from almost a brother greatly hurt her, even if it was completely justified by the situation. Haku, meanwhile, completely immersed himself in one of the mirrors, appearing before his friends as his reflection. Naruto, looking at him, whistled. Yet it is one thing to remember that he can do this, or observe this technique from afar, and quite another to see it right in front of him. RR, finally pull yourself together. This ice boy is already ready to attack you, and you still haven't told your vile friend about our fake plan. The nine-tailed kunoichi roared like thunder in the kunoichi's head, tearing her away from her admiration for Haku's technique. Look around. Meanwhile, the Nuke Nin laughed, finding himself right behind the genin of the Hidden Leaf Village, thereby causing the Uchiha, who was following his movements, to twitch nervously. Yes, I remember. Naruto snorted, who was already quite fed up with the nagging of her overexcited inner demon today. Sasuke, I have a plan. The blonde quietly shushed in her friend's ear, distracting the guy who was already ready to use Katan, Gukukyu, but Jutsu. The Uchiha shuddered strangely and stared in disbelief at the girl standing too close to him. Naruto, winking at the guy, waved a parchment with an intricate seal drawn on it in front of his eyes, held between her index and middle fingers. You wanted to use the great fireball now, right? She drawled with feigned curiosity, and without even allowing Sasuke to open his mouth, she immediately continued, and this is a strengthening seal, it can strengthen your attack almost twice, but this seal will only work once. The kunoichi said proudly, mentally complaining that she had not yet had seals for a longer service life. Yes, and they had to be applied either on the inside of the clothes, or directly on the body. However, Naruto knew that even with the enhancement, Sasuke's fire would not be able to destroy Haku's ice mirrors, so… Enough chattering already, act! Kurama's menacing voice growled impatiently in the blonde's skull, already tired of waiting for him to finally be able to give himself free rein for at least some time. Meanwhile, Sasuke nodded and allowed Naruto to stick a seal on his stomach, in the place where the chakra was concentrated when using this technique. Katan, Gukukyu no Jutsu, the Uchiha said loudly, releasing a huge flaming fireball from his mouth, which literally consumed all the mirrors opposite him. Naruto involuntarily retreated, covering her face with her hand, because this time the heat from Sasuke's jutsu was too strong. Even Kurama whistled in surprise in her head, clearly not expecting the guy, even with her seal, to gain much less. The girl, covering her teary eyes with her hand, thought for a second about the possibility of destroying the ice mirrors with this fire. However, as soon as the flames died down, leaving behind small orange flames gently clinging to the ground, Naru realized how wrong she was. After all, the only thing that has changed is the landscape surrounding them with Sasuke. These are small puddles that appear under the mirrors and slowly disappearing steam. Nothing happened to them, the girl muttered dejectedly, examining the blackened seal on her friend's shirt. Such fire will not melt my ice. Haku responded emotionlessly, looking lifelessly at the pair of teenagers. Although the attempt was quite good, crap. The Uchiha snorted, most likely feeling only his own guilt in the failure. Look, what a vulnerable boy! Kurama weakly snapped at this statement. And the next second, Naruto and Sasuke were attacked by a whole barrage of sharp needles, aiming to hit vital organs. At least, that's how the action looked from the outside. It is impossible to see my movements with the naked eye. Reappearing in the reflection of the mirror directly opposite the genin, Haku said, watching his opponents slowly become covered in blood from small cuts. You'll never catch me, said the guy, again disappearing from the teenagers' visibility, only to attack them again with a flurry of needles a second later. Let's see, the blonde shouted, miraculously dodging most of the needles, under the menacing growl of her tenant, and immediately folded her hands in a seal. Tajru Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, she said loudly and clearly, completely ignoring Sasuke's protest as she watched a dozen of her clones attack Haku's mirrors. Naruto herself decided to stay on the ground, carefully watching as her doubles, one after another, evaporated into a white haze, unable to break the ice with the jutsu. However, her attack had a slightly different purpose. Firstly, the girl wanted to help Sasuke catch Haku's movement between the mirrors. Secondly, the kunoichi wanted to try to match him in speed using the Thunder God technique, for which she needed seals that needed to be placed on the mirrors. This is exactly what her clones tried to do, since the girl's favorite kunai were not an option this time. Only, out of a dozen of her doubles, only 2 achieved their goal by placing seals on a pair of adjacent mirrors. This jutsu moves me through reflections. Stopping, the guy in the mirror told the teenagers, seeming slightly surprised that the blonde did not attack him along with her clones. That's why for me you can barely move. He grinned, disappearing from view again. Well, he's starting to annoy me. The kunoichi snorted to herself, in the outside world again getting into the shadow cloning stance. Somewhere in the distance, Kakashi's voice was heard, talking about the improved genome, which, in fact, not only Haku and Sasuke had, but also Naruto herself, seals of the Whirlpool clan, which could only be created by scarlet-haired demons, as all the hidden shinobi villages used to call them. Or rather, it was not the seals themselves, but an unusual chakra and its large volume. However, the blonde did not care about all this. With manic zeal she folded the seals for shadow cloning over and over again, absolutely not caring about the supply of chakra and her own safety. "Calm down, very soon you will kill him like my Jinchuriki," Kurama drawled sarcastically in her head, seeming to enjoy the madness happening in the outside world. But the girl wanted to do it on her own, but she couldn't do it. "This kind of jutsu cannot be copied even by me. It is almost impossible to cope with." Hitaki's voice was heard from afar, notifying everyone that he and Sasuke could not cope with Haku. These words angered the girl, who was already irritated by her failure, even more. "Damn it!" she screamed to the loud laughter of the Ninetales, which clearly did not improve the mood of his Jinchuriki. "So what?" continued the blonde in the same tone so that everyone who was on this damn bridge could hear her. "I can't die here," she said to the applause of her demon. "I have a dream, I must fulfill it," Naruto shouted, looking straight into her opponent's face, which for a second showed something akin to understanding. Actually, initially the kunoichi did not want to touch on this topic, but having completely lost her temper, she simply could not resist. "Well done, Naru, so do them all!" The Ninetales suddenly boomed, completely drowning out the Nukanin's voice for the kunoichi, who was already tuned in to listen to Haku's long answer. Although she already knew that he also had a dream, only it belonged not to the guy himself, but to Zabuza. This to some extent upset the kunoichi, but at the same time she perfectly understood the guy's desire to help and make happy the one who saved him from the cold of loneliness, and most likely from death. "You know, Kurama, I feel sorry for him," the kunoichi responded quietly, ignoring the words of the guy crucifying in front of her with Sasuke. "If only I could take him to our village. But without Momochi, he will refuse, and Zabuza will never agree, since in any of the shinobi villages, only death awaits him, as a dangerous nukenin," she said to the chuckle of her tailed friend, just like Zabuza, who believes that his Jinchuriki is too kind and naive for a shinobi, which will probably never change. However, her father, from whom Naruto inherited this, did not prevent this character trait from being Hokage. "For the sake of my dream, I can become a true shinobi," the guy said louder, interrupting the flow of thoughts of the blonde and the Ninetales, who was ready to answer her. "I can kill you. Sasuke, Naruto, ask him," Sakura shouted from a distance, trying to cheer up her teammates, but was abruptly interrupted by Kakashi's quiet voice, reaching them only in fragments of phrases. And Zabuza's laughter, frightening and chilling to the marrow of the bones, a cold laugh, which was followed by a new attack from Haku, more brutal and powerful, making it clear that the guy had been holding back before. Naruto and Sasuke tried over and over again to do something with Haku's needles, repel, dodge, or at least try to counterattack. But all this was to no avail. Over the past 15 minutes, the kunoichi used the shadow cloning technique several more times, and all she achieved was 3 more marked adjacent mirrors. Sasuke, slowly but surely, with the feasible help of the blonde, who sacrificed her doubles, began to keep up with the trajectory of Haku's movements between his mirrors. But all this was too slow, because already now both Uchiha and Naru were almost all covered with blood, scratches and needles protruding from their bodies. Suddenly, the entire space was cut through by a sharp cry from Sakura, notifying her teammates that something out of the ordinary had happened. "Can you hear it? The blood of your loved one." As if deliberately adding fuel to the fire, Kurama said. "A lot of blood," drawled the Ninetales, and again disappeared somewhere in her inner world, preparing for the moment when he would have to break Minato's seal. Naruto swallowed cautiously, feeling deep within herself a slowly creeping fear for Kakashi, Sasuke, Sakura and, of course, Tazuna. After all, if something happens to any of them, only she will be to blame because of her weakness and selfishness. Naruto's next attempt to put seals on Haku's mirrors failed miserably, which could not be said about the guy's attack. The blonde felt a sharp, severe pain throughout her body, weakness and nausea, and Naruto's head began to spin. What happened next, the kunoichi remembered only in fits and starts. It seemed she started to fall, but someone caught her and carefully laid her on the cold concrete. Kurama growled something in her head, tried to bring his Jinchuriki to his senses, merging his voice with Sasuke, which for the first time in all time did not bother him at all. Naru would probably have been happy about this, if not for the heaviness in her body and the terrible desire to fall asleep and forget about everything in the world. Intellectually, the girl understood that she seemed to have overdone it with enthusiasm and, instead of going into deep defense, for some reason she decided to prove something to someone, for which she paid. Then suddenly there was silence, and the kunoichi's consciousness disconnected from reality at the most inopportune moment for this. Naruto's awakening was not pleasant: heaviness, pain, nausea, dizziness. All this attacked the kunoichi with renewed vigor, completely depriving her of the opportunity to feel anything. Carefully sitting down on the pinkish concrete because of the blood mixed with water, the girl looked around incomprehensibly and shuddered. In the far corner of the cage of ice mirrors, Haku was reclining, and right in front of her, standing slightly staggering, was Sasuke, in front of whom scarlet blood spread in a small puddle. Naruto swallowed the lump that had formed in her throat, not knowing what to do now, because of her selfishness, her best friend could really die now. She should have protected him, she should have just pretended to pass out, she should have thought with her head. What am I? Literally, feeling warm drops of tears rolling down my cheeks, leaving wet, dirty paths on my face. I've been saying this for a long time, Naruto. Kurama drawled ironically in her head, seemingly not even noticing the state of his friend. But that's not about that now. Don't worry, he's alive and will live. The Ninetales drawled in a slightly disappointed voice. However, Naru knew that her friend had long since stopped hating the Uchiha. At least that's for sure. Your ice boy didn't aim at the vital organs, so get ready, Rag. My exit is coming soon, so don't disgrace the name of the Jinchuriki of the Ninetales. He growled, causing the blonde to flinch, and immediately, nodding in agreement, wiped away the tears, or rather, smeared them across his dirty face, covered in blood and dust. Lord, I thought you were dead, Sasuke said with a deep laugh, turning slightly towards his friend. Pale, he was too pale. Suddenly it hit the girl in the head, causing anxiety. And then a muffled cough burst out of his chest and a huge clot of blood spread like a crimson spot right under the brunette's feet. I'm so glad you're okay, Naruto, he said, turning completely to the girl, and looked with empty scarlet eyes with black splashes. He awakened his Sharingan. Well, your face. Sasuke chuckled hoarsely, swaying. Why? That was all the blonde could say in a dull voice, perfectly remembering this picture from her past life. Only then she really didn't understand this. But now this question was dictated by the approaching hysteria that shackled the kunoichi's entire body. You are real after all, Naru, the guy grinned, slowly falling to the side. You are my beloved little sister, how could I leave you? He chuckled in a completely Uchiha-like manner when the girl picked him up literally a few centimeters from the concrete, allowing him to lie on her lap. Just like in childhood, when they rested after training and regular games. Sasuke was always the first to run out of steam, because Naruto, thanks to Kakashi's Spartan regime, was already extremely resilient even then. Therefore, the Uchiha often rested with his head on his friend's lap, as if on a pillow. I didn't ask you for this kind of help. The girl shouted loudly, feeling his cold skin under her fingers. What will I tell Itachi? Sasuke, please, the girl whispered with tears, completely forgetting about the tailed man's words. She was really afraid that he might never open his night black eyes again. I wanted so much to take revenge. My clan, the guy forced out, and carefully reached out with a shaking hand to the kunoichi's face. But you are more important than this, you. Live. Without reaching it, the guy's hand went limp and fell on the concrete, his eyes closed, and Sasuke himself seemed to have completely stopped breathing. Haku spoke quietly in the background, but the girl did not hear or see anything, as if she had fallen into a vacuum. She was completely filled with hatred, and the only thing she wanted was kill everyone who is responsible for Sasuke's condition. Naruto, fuck you, get it together! The Nine-Tails growled in her head, feeling a sharp surge of negativity from his Jinchuriki. He's alive, and if you don't calm down, you won't be able to control my power. Remember our plan, Naru? I'm not sure I can do everything myself. Kurama barked so that the blonde flinched as if from a strong slap in the face or a light electric shock, finally regaining consciousness and throwing off the dark networks of hatred. So that in the next minute he could feel the burning heat of scarlet chakra flowing through the hole in the seal that Kurama had been pushing with effort for the last hour. Actually, that is why the Nine-Tails was mostly silent and did not get involved in what was happening. Because it was necessary to make a hole in Minato's seal right now, otherwise Kakashi. Yes, even Sakura and Sasuke would have noticed the tailed chakra in Naru. Is this the first time your friend has died? Meanwhile, Haku said, looking at the hunched back of the blonde, from which his own needles were sticking out. Her high ponytail was askew, her sunny hair was matted and stained with dirt and blood, and she was trembling slightly. What can you do? This is the way of a shinobi. The guy calmly finished, not in a hurry to return to the mirror, but in vain. Naruto felt the scarlet, angry, dirty, but incredibly powerful chakra of Kurama flowing slowly, viscously through the broken seal. She brought out everything dark and disgusting in her, reminding her of how she was treated in the village in a past life, and in this one too. The desire to avenge Sasuke was closely intertwined with the desire for revenge on this entire world and the desire to burn everyone off the face of the earth, destroying all life around. Shut up! Naru shouted in a voice that was not her own, cold, bilious and ringing with anger, finally releasing Kurama's chakra outward, feeling how happy her old friend was to finally receive, albeit imaginary, but still freedom. Even if it was temporary, even if this time he couldn't even release his tails, but still, I will finish you. The blonde growled menacingly like the Nine-Tails, turning to Haku. This time, not a trace remained of her blue eyes, good-natured radiant smile and sweet face. Scarlet eyes with a vertical pupil, pointed, elongated fangs forming a wild grin and overgrown nails, although now they looked more like claws, made the blonde more like a beast. The guy involuntarily recoiled to the side from the evil chakra that flared from it, watching in surprise as the wounds inflicted by his needles on Naruto's body literally healed before his eyes. The needles themselves, by the way, whistled out of the girl's body under the pressure of an ominous scarlet chakra, swirling around the blonde. Well, shall we take revenge on this ice boy for our arrogant Uchiha? Kurama roared at full strength, finally feeling the freedom he had long awaited. Ours? The girl grinned at his words, carefully laying the body of her childhood friend on the concrete, now, like her tailed beast, feeling that nothing threatened his life. Now she could clearly see that Sasuke was simply overtired due to the use of fire techniques, Sharingan and Bear Chakra. And the great loss of blood did not make the situation better for him. But still, he was alive and relatively healthy, which meant that Haku still could not cross the line and become a real shinobi. God, yes, I've accepted that this upstart has become part of our strange family. Am I happy? The fox snorted good-naturedly, realizing that he was completely burned in front of her. So stop chattering and move on. Let's twist this icy little guy and, with feeling, we'll hit the Jonin's psyche. The tailed bastard laughed, putting the brakes on his Jinchuriki's joke for the first time. Come on, Kurama! The kunoichi responded in tune with him, tearing off an elastic band that she no longer needed from her hair, seeming to have become infected with his enthusiasm, and finally allowed the Nine-Tails chakra to mix with her own. Scarlet chakra, like hot lava, gushed through the Kirakway, slowly filling Naruto's tenketsu. The girl was instantly pierced by a burning pain. She felt her body changing. Some bones are enlarged, muscles are torn, the jaw is slightly stretched. All this literally caused her agony, but the kunoichi endured it stoically, reassuring herself that now, at least, her skin was not melting. When the pain subsided slightly, it seemed to the blonde that much more than an hour had passed. Only, in fact, not even a minute has passed. This was proven by the fact that Haku still stood not far from his ice mirror and watched with some horror the changes in the girl. Naruto suddenly perked up, throwing back her disheveled hair, reminiscent of a bristling cat from the side, and, looking from under her brows at Haku, rushed to attack with lightning speed. The guy, trying to defend himself, threw several needles at the blonde, which, to his surprise, were knocked down by the release of chakra that escaped from the girl's mouth along with a roar. Having collected himself a little, Haku quickly dived into the mirror and, finding himself above Naruto, tried to attack her with a direct blow to the heart. But the girl, as if sensing a threat, jerked away to the side, landing a meter away from him. From the guy's sharply pale, slightly elongated face, it immediately became clear to the kunoichi he is seriously frightened by what is happening. This is probably why Haku, without stopping, forgetting about caution, tried to hide in his mirrors, but Naru, this time, turned out to be many times faster than him. She, forcefully grabbing his wrist, released a huge amount of chakra, simply suppressing the Nukenin, who was trying with all his might to hold the seal with one hand. The chakra pressure around him crushed the concrete into crumbs and slowly melted the ice mirrors, and the blonde's grip made the bones of his wrist crack. Crap! The guy shouted with his last strength, looking into the scarlet eyes of the girl, who has now changed beyond recognition, it seems, completely crazy because of the death of her friend. Naruto, finally turning her attention to him, stopped emitting chakra and, gathering it in her fist, swung it to strike. "Hey, you won't just knock him out, you'll kill him!" Kurama remarked slightly ironically, previously admiringly watching the actions of his Jinchuriki. "Don't be afraid, this is his payback for everything he did to me and Sasuke." The kunoichi responded in the same tone, but still slowed down slightly. The blonde's fist whistlingly slammed into Haku's cheek with such force that the poor guy, having broken through one of the mirrors, flew to the side a good 10 meters, almost reaching the section of the bridge hidden by thick fog, where the Jonins fought. However, the guy, despite this, staggered to his feet. Blood flowed in a thin stream from the corners of his mouth, and in the place where Naruto's fist had hit there was a quickly growing bruise. The blonde, snorting something abusive, took off from her seat, wanting to add, but approaching him, she froze right in front of him, feeling with her skin that he, already given up. The girl barked, piercing the guy with an angry look. However, her anger was feigned, rather, she was angry with him. "Why did you stop?" Looking straight into Naruto's eyes, he asked in a lifeless voice, as if he had already come to terms with his death. "I killed your friend, but you still can't kill me?" The guy drawled. The kunoichi's eyes narrowed, and the pupil became almost invisible. She knew what he was trying to do, she knew, but she still couldn't ignore his provocation. Therefore, instead of carefully stunning him, another blow filled with detailed chakra flew straight into Haku's solar plexus. But unlike the last time, the guy did not fly away. At the last moment, Naruto grabbed him by the waist, feeling how his whole body tensed and went limp in her arms. Still, despite his anger and irritation, the kunoichi felt damn sorry for him, because Haku was just like her in his past life, a lonely, misunderstood outcast. He decided to die, realizing that he had lost to her, because Zabuza did not need a weak shinobi. At least, that's what Haku himself thought, deep inside remaining the same little orphan whose mother was killed by his own father. The guy was subconsciously afraid that the Nukenin would leave him because of this, completely breaking his fragile heart. But what he didn't know was that Momochi didn't really care whether his partner won or not, because he had long since begun to consider him his family. "Well, are you ready?" the tailed one drawled, watching the girl take out a seal prepared in advance from her pouch. It was with the help of such a seal that she bound those who attacked Inari and Tsunami with blue chakra chains. This was much faster and much more reliable than if she had used ordinary ropes. "Are you sure everything will be fine?" the girl asked while exhaling, having made the hand seals necessary for activation. The guy lying in front of her was instantly enveloped in pale red chains, since this time Naruto used not her own chakra, but the Nine Tails. "Yes, Naru." Kurama drawled, deciding to remain silent that at the same time his girlfriend would feel pain hundreds of times stronger than when capturing her body. We should hurry. Kakashi has already summoned his pack of dogs, setting them on Zabuza. He growled, wincing slightly, because over the past few days he had already grown to hate ninja dogs. I know, the blonde said quietly, immediately disappearing from the place using the Thunder God technique. Give up, or death awaits you. The kunoichi heard Kakashi's quiet voice rushing by, just like her father, yellow lightning through the dense fog of jutsu. And the closer she was to the battlefield, the more clearly she heard the noise of her beloved's raikiri, which slowly deafened the girl. Get ready! Kurama quietly drawled in the kunoichi's head as soon as she saw through the dissipating fog the back of her beloved, attacking Zabuza, held back by the Niken. The next moment, the kunoichi was right behind him, next to her seal, which surprisingly still remained on the Jonin's back. Naruto, in one deft and smooth movement, skirted the man and slid forward to at the last moment end up exactly between Hatake and his target. And then Naruto's heart was pierced by agonizing pain. Kakashi's downcast face was stained with warm blood. The man slowly looked up, wanting to see Zabuza's face before his death. No matter what he had said before, the copy ninja respected him as a worthy opponent and wanted to show it. But instead of Momochi, Hatake saw the pale face of his beloved student. His Naru, the feelings he confessed to himself just a few weeks ago. Startled, the copy ninja blinked in disbelief, trying to drive away the obsession that had emerged from his worst nightmare. But the girl did not disappear anywhere. Still standing in front of him, she smiled forcefully, and crimson blood flowed from the corners of her lips in a thin stream. The frightened screams of Sakura and Tazuna were heard in the periphery, finally being able to see what was happening because of the fog that had finally cleared. It seemed that even Zabuza, standing behind the blonde, quietly said something not entirely censored, not believing that it was she who protected him. Only Kakashi didn't care about all this. He literally felt the heart that had been beating lately dying in his chest only thanks to this sunny girl. Pictures of how his father died, from whom everyone turned away because of his wrong act, flew through the man's head at the speed of light. How he once, because of his own selfishness and obstinacy, led to the death of his first true friend Obito. How he killed Rin with his own hands. Just as he now killed the daughter of his teacher, who once replaced his father and supports him to this day. The girl who pulled him out of the darkness of pain and self-loathing and made him laugh. Sunnyheim of the Hidden Leaf Village Naruto Namikaze. With his own hands he killed the one he loved with all his wounded black heart. You know, even I feel a little sorry for him now. The tailed kunoichi responded surprisingly peacefully and understandingly in his head, when the pain from a direct blow from the raikiri slightly receded, and the internal wounds slowly began to heal. However, if she had received such a blow in her normal state, most likely she would have remained alive. The difference is that most likely the blonde would have passed out from the shock of pain, and recovery would have taken many times longer. I hope this pain will help him develop his Sharingan. The girl responded barely audibly, trying not to think that she might have helped Obito with this. Kakashi, the blonde said in a hoarse voice, barely audible, placing her hand with claws on the man's palm, still pressed to her shoulder. As if frozen, he blinked, and it seems, only now noticed changes in the appearance of the girl in front of him, clearly showing that she was now using the tailed chakra. Why, Naru? Why did you do this? Hatake said sadly, looking at the staggering blonde who protected the enemy at the cost of her life. At least, he sincerely thought so, because the raikiri did not survive. Is death waiting for me? Meanwhile, Zabuza, having died away, grinned, all stained with the blonde's blood. You're wrong again, Kakashi. He laughed, but was interrupted by a hoarse laugh, mixed with a bloody cough, from the one who obscured him. I did it. Because I didn't want. So that you, worthy shinobi, the blonde suddenly coughed violently, and staggering, almost fell, but was caught in time by Kakashi, who still seems to think that she is going to die. You. No one should die because of a person like Gato. In one breath, the girl blurted out, again feeling her lover take her in his arms like a princess. The kunoichi, closing her scarlet eyes, smiled, feeling in the place where Hataki hid a pleasant warmth, slowly spreading throughout her entire body. This meant that Kurama's chakra had finally begun to slowly evaporate from the kunoichi's body. "Hey, don't forget the most important thing!" The Nine-Tails laughed sarcastically in the girl's skull, tearing her out of the pleasant bliss that had finally subsided the pain from the wound and the overwhelming heat of the scarlet chakra. "I understand that you are tired, but pull yourself together and finish what you started," he growled, trying to cheer up his Jinchuriki, who, after the cover was lifted, literally collapsed, and he did it perfectly. "I'll kill you!" The girl heard, thanks to Kurama, emerging from the pool of peace, an evil growl, and you can't say it any other way, a copy ninja directed towards Momochi. "Wait, Kakashi, Gato deceived him," the girl said in a more confident voice, still lying in the arms of her commander, and opened her usual, clear blue eyes. "He wants to come here and finish off whichever of you survives," the blonde said almost in a whisper, and coughed again, spitting out the remaining blood, thanks to the scarlet chakra slowly flowing from her Tenketsu and Kirikuki, having almost recovered from the wound of the Raikiri. "There is no need for you to fight anymore, because everything is fine with me, Haku and Sasuke." Almost in one breath, the girl said so that everyone who was on the bridge could hear her, and took a deep breath, frantically clutching the vest of the Jonin Hataki. "Well, you heard her, Zabuza," Kakashi said with some relief, hugging Naruto to himself, finally realizing that his student was not going to die today. "Yes." After the Niken holding him back disappeared with a bang, Momochi responded, not knowing why he so simply agreed to give up on his plan and aspiration, for the sake of which he made an attempt on the Mizukage and fled from the village of Mist. He simply did not want to confront this absurd, but too strange, girl for the daughter of the Hokage and a simple genin. "Wow, you really managed to save these two," Kurama said, slightly surprised, doubting to the last that this plan would really work out. And then, the girl snorted, falling into a doze again due to fatigue. Chapter 30, Reckoning. Naruto, feeling an incredible heaviness throughout her body, gradually regained consciousness, returning to the harsh reality where there was pain, fatigue, and terrible tension. The girl's whole body seemed to be filled with lead due to clogged muscles and chakra depletion, but her mind was still slightly clouded, refusing to clearly perceive the world around her. The first thing the kunoichi heard, gradually coming to her senses and starting to think connectedly, the soothing, quiet and peaceful snoring of the Nine-Tails deep in her inner world. Exhausted from breaking through Minato's seal and using his chakra for the first time after a long break, the demon fox, like his Jinchuriki, passed out immediately after Zabuza's words about stopping his fight with Kakashi. Nera felt this at the edge of her floating consciousness, like the tailed one, falling into the oblivion so desired for her at that moment. For, as soon as the blonde realized that her and Kurama's plan had been a success, and she had managed to prevent the death of the Nuke-nin, the girl was instantly overcome by terrible fatigue. Smiling widely at her thoughts, Naruto sleepily stretched on a soft futon, stretching her limbs that were slightly stiff during sleep, and finally opened her blue eyes, wanting to understand. Where is she now and how long she has been unconscious? The darkness surrounding the girl who had just woken up on all sides literally blinded her in the first seconds. Throwing aside the stuffy, heavy blanket, she carefully rose up on her elbows, which was shaking due to fatigue, warily peering into the darkness surrounding her. "Thank God, Naru, you finally woke up." A voice, slightly hoarse, but despite this, perfectly familiar to the blonde, quietly rang out somewhere to her left. And then, next to the lying girl, a small dim candle lit up, illuminating with its light the small room provided to Hataki, as the squad leader, by Tazuna. The genin, despite the fact that they were of different sexes, slept in the same room, which, by the way, only caused inconvenience to Sasuke. Since Sakura was only happy to live next to the object of her love, and Naruto considered him something of an older brother, without experiencing any embarrassment due to their proximity. The kunoichi looked slightly sluggishly to the left, searching with her eyes for her sensei, but when her gaze met his, she shuddered in fear. Kakashi looked absolutely terrible. A pale, slightly haggard face, a worried look from a black eye uncovered by a protector, and a tired, somehow forced smile visible through his thick black mask. Naruto swallowed, frantically trying to remember what state her sensei was in before she passed out on that ill-fated bridge. A few shallow cuts from the shuriken, a puncture wound in his palm from a kunai, and a fairly deep, but not too dangerous, wound across his chest from Zabuza's sword. In general, there was nothing that could cause such a state in Hatake. Unless, after she fell into oblivion, Momochi still changed his mind about retreating and fought with the copy ninja. For no one but him could harm the former ANBU captain. Haku, even if he had come to his senses after her blow reinforced by Scarlet Chakra, certainly could not free himself from the binding seal of the Whirlpool clan. Gato's thugs were simply no match for two experienced jonin who had gone through the Shinobi World War. As a last resort, Hatake and Zabuza had quite impressive reinforcements in the person of the inhabitants of the Country of Waves, whom Inari was supposed to lead to the battle site. "Kakashi, what the hell happened to you?" the blonde asked slightly hysterically, sitting up abruptly, which made her slightly dizzy, and her insides insistently asked to come out. But the kunoichi did not pay any attention to these ailments. She was only worried about the state of the copy ninja, for which she again blamed only herself. "Was it Zabuza? He still decided to fight you." Right, the girl jabbered, not allowing the man to open his mouth, while at the same time trying to more accurately determine the state of her sensei by eye. "Calm down already!" Kurama growled sleepily at his friend, dissatisfied with his abrupt awakening, waking up due to the internal monologue and worries of his unlucky Jinchuriki. "Didn't you think in your empty head that your loved one was just worried about you?" The fox, angry as hell, chuckled ironically, and yawning deliciously, added too caustically even for himself. "Whatever one may say, but technically speaking, he almost killed you with a direct blow from the Raikiri right in the heart." "No. This can't be." Naruto drawled in disbelief at his words, as she most often did in her past life, simply not wanting to realize what was already on the surface. "No, Naru, he really left Tazuna alone and retreated." Meanwhile, Hatake quietly responded, continuously, somehow sadly looking at his most unpredictable student, as if she could evaporate at any moment, to some extent, confirming with these actions and words the assumption of the Nine Tails. "Almost immediately after you passed out," the man said, stumbling sharply on the last word, strangely, painfully or something, looking straight into the girl's clear and too naive blue eyes for a shinobi, Gato appeared on the bridge with his gang of thugs. Kakashi said as he continued to look into the eyes of his teacher's only daughter, to whom, 13 years ago, he swore to protect this girl even at the cost of his life, and as a result, he almost killed her. "You were right, Naruto. He did not want to pay Zabuza for his task, deciding to kill either him, who carried out the order, or the three of us, completely exhausted from the brutal battle with him and Haku." Ironic, the copy ninja grinned, watching the blonde slowly relax after his words. But since this didn't happen, Gato decided to finish off all the shinobi on the bridge at once, which, in fact, he most likely would have succeeded, since Zabuza and I were the only ones who could still fight, but only given our condition. Spreading his hands, the copy ninja told her, while looking at his first student with some pride. "But Inari, inspired by you, my dear, saved us, somehow managing to bring with him almost all the inhabitants of the village who wanted to protect their home," he said encouragingly, and placing his hand on her shoulder, squeezed it lightly. "Here you see." Kurama chuckled sarcastically after his monologue. "By the way, did you notice that he called you his darling?" he purred meaningfully. However, perhaps the kunoichi only imagined this, since her friend over the past 30 years of their acquaintance, 15 of which they were close friends, had never heard anything like that from him. "Shut up already, fox face." His Jinchuriki snapped, slightly embarrassed, releasing all the tension that had accumulated over the past days onto her tailed beast, while deep in her soul experiencing a feeling of gratitude to Kurama and a terrible remorse for Kakashi. Whatever one may say, his face at the moment when he saw his student exposing herself to the blow of a Raikiri was terrible. It seemed that he had struck not her, but himself, tearing out his own heart. and the way the man looked now only aggravated the girl's condition. Sorry, unable to bear it, the kunoichi said out loud, finally finding the strength to look straight into the eyes of her beloved, and the fear and pain that she saw in them honestly frightened Naruto very much. I didn't know it would happen like this, Kakashi. I saw you when you were already attacking Zabuza, the blonde said confusedly, feeling her eyes begin to water, while Hataki's gaze became somehow empty and glassy. Everything heals very quickly on me. And considering that I was under the cover of the Nine Tails, I thought, she blurted out hysterically, not knowing how else to apologize to him, because the look of her sensei, after the words she had uttered, made it clear to the girl that this act was too cruel. She had no right to do this, knowing how he treated her and her father. You shouldn't have gotten hurt because of that bastard Gato. Don't worry about it, Naru, I understand you meant what was best. Interrupting the blonde's beginning hysteria, he said to Hataki in such a tone that her heart sank even more. Imagine what your daddy will do when he finds out. The tailed trickster neighed in the kunoichi's head, trying to calm his Jinchuriki in such a strange way. Which, by the way, he did just fine, because after hearing about Minato, like a mother hen taking care of his daughter, Naruto suddenly wanted to run away somewhere far, far away. Well, or join Akatsuki to try to destroy this organization from the inside and snitch on the heads of Obito and Madara. God, don't remind me. The blonde drawled angrily, vividly imagining how she would be locked in a room until she came of age. Kakashi-sensei, you're not going to tell my father about this, are you? She asked very quietly, mentally praying to all the gods that he would remain silent, because otherwise he would also be upset. You'll have to, Naru. Quite the sharply pale Hataki smiled sadly at her, seeming to have imagined the consequences of his conversation with the Hokage. You used the tailed cloak, which means that Minato-sensei's seal has weakened or broken, the man said as he exhaled, finally closing his tired eyes, seeming to finally begin to let go of this whole situation. He must find out. But we can keep silent about my injury, right? Slyly, just like the Nine Tails, the kunoichi said. I doubt it, because not only we know about it, said the copy ninja, and then added, better sleep a little more, you need to fully recover. He won't lie to your daddy, which means you and I will have a hard time. Kurama summed up gloomily, to the agreement of his Jinchuriki. We will return to this conversation later, the girl promised him, again looking around her sensei's room, where she woke up and, to her surprise, did not find a second futon for him. How long did I even sleep? The blonde asked thoughtfully, not even thinking about going to bed to rest, especially since Kakashi needed it many times more. A little more than a day passed. The man answered in a tired voice, knowing full well that it was useless to argue with this girl, because if she wants something, she'll get something dead. Now quickly go to bed, Hataki said more sternly, looking at the girl with her head down. If he wants to put you to bed like that, let him lie down next to you. The tailed reptile, who knows well the character of his meticulous and kind-hearted Jinchuriki, who would not simply leave this situation, burst out laughing at the words of the copying ninja. And this is an idea. The kunoichi immediately picked up his words with a slight start, seemingly not even noticing the mockery in Kurama's voice, which whistled after the girl's exclamation, if you want to put me to bed, then lie down next to me. Sternly, as if his mother, she said to Naruto, watching how the Jonin's face stretched out in surprise, and a blush appeared on his cheeks, barely noticeable in the candlelight. Judging by your appearance, you also need a good rest, Kakashi. Falling onto the futon, she playfully said to Naruto, moving to the very edge. Everything else is tomorrow. She whispered, yawning, feeling her beloved lie down next to her with a heavy sigh. Over the next 2 weeks from that night, the blonde learned that Zabuza and Haku, without waiting for her to come to her senses, left the land of waves that same day. However, the Nukenin of the Hidden Mist village left a rather laconic message for her. I hope we will meet again when you grow up a little, Heimlista, which was creaky, but could be taken as his recognition of the kunoichi's power and acceptance of the fact that he is now her debtor. Naruto also received a small letter from Haku, in which he thanked her for saving Zabuza, admitted that he did not want to kill them, and offered her friendship. The guy was so sincerely sorry that even Kakashi, stingy in showing his feelings, was imbued with himself Sasuke and the cynical, human-hating Kurama. By the way, the younger Uchiha changed quite a lot after the fight on the bridge, which slightly worried Naruto and strained her inner demon. Because Sasuke began to resemble himself from her previous life, and it didn't end too well. But the most unpleasant thing was that she was indirectly to blame here too. From the words of Tazuna, the only one who agreed to tell the blonde in detail about what happened after she passed out, the guy, like Hatake, suffered greatly mentally from her prank. Waking up alone, Sasuke, whom everyone had forgotten thanks to Naruto's act, slowly walked to the site of the Jounin battle. And this happened just at the moment when she, all stained with her own blood flowing from a huge wound on her chest, passed out in Kakashi's arms. The bridge builder told the girl that at that moment the Uchiha reminded him more and Sakura, who rushed to him, walking corpse he, ignoring Haruno's cries, walked up to Hatake on stiff legs, who had just agreed on a truce with Momochi, and gave him a resounding slap in the face, while snorting something viciously right in his face. And after the sensei's words that the girl in his arms was simply unconscious, the Uchiha looked at him with a hard look, and after checking her pulse, nodded silently. However, after the fight, when they returned to Tazuna's house, and Sasuke was finally told how his childhood friend was wounded, he somehow reacted too apathetically to it. Muttering something about crazy blondes and crooked-armed ANBU, the guy, ignoring Sakura's offer to treat his wounds, simply went into the room. In general, now, standing on the completed bridge and saying goodbye to the inhabitants of the country of waves, Naruto was in slight confusion, not knowing how to react to what was happening. On the one hand, she fulfilled her program to the maximum, saving the lives of those who in the future during the war would be able to provide them with quite significant assistance. Kakashi, apparently, came to his senses in the morning of the day when Naru woke up. Waking up in her arms, the copy ninja smiled strangely and slipped out of them, leaving this sleeping girl alone. After which he returned to his usual state of a melancholic man, carrying a tattered aeronavel with him everywhere. But, on the other hand, there remained that part of Hatake that he hid from everyone, and neither the Kunoichi nor the Ninetales could imagine how this incident would turn out for them during the battle with Obito. Just like they didn't know what would happen next with Sasuke, who literally closed in on himself, often ignoring even his best friend. It seems that having accepted Haku's words about ninjas as truth, real shinobi should be soulless killers, with which Naruto did not agree at all. And of course, there was Naru's father, Minato, who loomed like a dark shadow somewhere on the horizon. Thanks to you, we were able to complete the construction of the bridge, but Tazuna said, standing in front of the villagers who had gathered to see off their saviors, directly opposite team number 7. It's still sad to leave. Exhaling, with sadness in his voice, he said, placing his hand on the shoulder of Inari, who was sniffing around. Thank you for everything. Kakashi answered cheerfully, having become accustomed to such farewells during his time as a shinobi. However, there was also a hint of sadness in his voice, because for the first time in a long time his task was so emotional. How sweet it all is! The tailed trickster snorted at this picture, making it clear to the blonde what he thought about all this. Are you really that impatient to meet my father? The Kunoichi asked Kurama sarcastically, to which he chuckled angrily and disappeared into the depths of her inner world. Don't be bored. Smiling warmly at Inari, she said out loud, stoically holding back treacherous tears, we will come to visit you again. Winking at the boy, she handed it to the Kunoichi. Look, through pent-up tears he squeezed out in response, smearing the snot that had flowed down his face with his fist. Do not forget, the boy said angrily, snuggling closer to his grandfather's leg. Inari, you're sad, right? The girl grinned, leaning closer to the guy. You can cry. Continuing to smile, she said and straightened up. I won't cry. Cry yourself if you want, he shouted, while adults and teenagers tried their best to hold back their touching smiles. I'm so tired of you. Unable to bear all this nonsense, Kurama exploded, resurfacing in the Kunoichi's skull. If you don't want to leave, spit on your love for Kakashi, your father, the upcoming war, and stay here with him. he said with undisguised irony, completely spoiling this touching moment. At least we'll save ourselves from catching up with Minato. Oh, come on, I should tease the boy before I leave. The kunoichi snorted, mentally waving her hand at his words. Well, if you say so, then bye, she said quietly, and waving her hand to everyone, turned around 180 degrees, hearing Inari still sobbing behind her. No, she felt sorry for the boy, but if she had not done this, they would have stood here until the night. Following her, the rest of the shinobi turned around, and Team Number 7 leisurely went back to the Hidden Leaf Village. Somewhere behind her, Tazuna's dialogue with one of the workers could be heard, and the girl's thoughts were already filled with what would happen in the village very soon. Namely, an explanation to his father, and a little later, an acquaintance with Gaara and the Chunin exam. Naruto cheerfully opened her eyes, stretched, jumped out of bed and, with a smile, danced towards the closet, wanting to wear something more feminine today than her usual jumpsuit. It was also noteworthy that the girl did all this while listening to a slightly nervous growl, periodically turning into the muttering of the nine-tailed demon sealed inside her. Actually, the reason for such strange behavior of the Jinchuriki and her bijou was that on this day there was supposed to be a meeting with her friend and his brother, respectively. However, if it weren't for Minato, who so often takes work home, either Naruto nor Kurama would have remembered the exact day of the hidden Sand Genin's arrival in their village, because time, no matter how one may say, took its toll. So, the kunoichi pulled out from the closet a light orange cotton sundress that her father had recently bought for her. On top it resembled a sleeveless shirt, leading into a skirt that reached just below the knees and had a whirlpool symbol on the back. The blonde, continuing to smile, spun around on her axis, threw her sundress on the bed and turned to the mirror, where a noticeably older girl in a light shirt was looking at her in the reflection. Although, this was not at all surprising, because almost 6 months had passed since the return from the Land of Waves. Then, returning to Konoha and reporting to the Hokage about what had happened, Naruto was locked at home for a month, and their team was given a short vacation after a difficult task. Needless to say, every single day during this month the girl listened to the lamentations, swearing, persuasion and screams of her father, who almost turned gray after hearing the report from Hatake. However, as far as she knew, the copy ninja also received the first number from his sensei and was almost sent into retirement. He was saved only by the loyal attitude of Minato, who knew that no one would protect his daughter better than Kakashi, and the bad character of Naruto herself, who definitely arranged she would really like her daddy for this, because she was madly in love with her commander. Moreover, exposing herself to her commander's Raikiri was her own brilliant idea. Well, naturally, after the end of her arrest and the release of her teammates, the tasks for Team Number 7 were given the simplest ones. And for a walk with the dogs, a trip to the store, or a get-together with the elderly and children, you could wear a dress. There have been no other assignments for Team Number 7 yet. Although there was something in all this that worried the girl a little, Minato was silent about her seal, the nine tails, and the cover. Again, you're about to cheat on your commander, huh, Nara? Finally moving away, Kurama said ironically, looking through the girl's eyes at the sundress that fit perfectly on her. I'm not cheating on anyone, fox face! The girl snorted at this, leaving her room. There was silence all around, which meant that in connection with the upcoming Chunin exam, the venue of which was the Hidden Leaf Village, her father had once again left for work before dawn. I just want to please him, or something. The girl continued hesitantly, slowly heading to the kitchen to check if Minato had breakfast. Because with all these important guests, genin from other villages and other important matters, her father sometimes did not eat anything all day. That's why Naruto left breakfast in the refrigerator for him every night, and a small snack for lunch. That's the old one. I forgot again. The girl hissed like an angry cat, finding in the refrigerator everything she had cooked yesterday. Like it, you say? The tailed man drawled ironically, completely ignoring the lamentations of his Jinchuriki about his father's breakfast. Or maybe someone wants to attract the attention of their sensei, who, after what happened in the country of waves, ignores him? The tailed trickster asked in a mocking tone, precisely indicating the reason for Naruto's desire to dress up. Still, Kakashi really lost interest in her after everything that happened. If before they were good friends, and maybe even a little more. But now their relationship boiled down to commander-subordinate. I already said no, the blonde barked, once again falling for the provocation of her inner demon. And anyway, we're already late, she said, swallowing the toast she was preparing for Minato as she walked, and fluttered out the door. Sasuke stood near the wooden fence, in the place where Team 7 was supposed to meet their commander. But the sensei himself, as usually happened, was very late, however, like his childhood friend, each time, by some miracle, arriving almost before him. And the only member of his squad, who, like the Uchiha himself, always arrived on time, irritated him more and more with every minute spent alone. Therefore, the guy, closing his eyes, skillfully pretended to be part of the fence, nipping in the bud all Sakura's attempts to talk to him. And in general, rather than stand here, he would rather practice using his Sharingan somewhere with Itachi or Shursui. His eyes were awakened during the battle with that hunter Nin from the village of Mist, when he tried to protect his best friend, who once again overdid it during the battle. But when he saw what he thought was a dead girl in Kakashi's arms, something happened to his eyes. If you believe Itachi's words, then this was the next stage in the development of the Sharingan, to achieve which you had to kill someone who was immensely dear to you. This is what worried the Uchiha, because in fact he was in no way involved in Naruto's injury, but indirectly, he still blamed only himself for her injury, since once again he could not protect the person dear to him. That's why Sasuke has been trying to communicate for almost 6 months with your best and only friend, as little as possible. He didn't want her to stop his development as a shinobi in the future. Well, or he was simply afraid of not being able to protect Nara again. Good morning, Sakura, Sasuke. Naruto's cheerful voice rang out throughout the street, and the Uchiha's heart again sank with contempt for himself. He slowly opened his eyes, about to nod, but froze, staring at his friend in surprise. She was somehow completely different from her usual self. Was it the dress or the figure, usually hidden by the new slightly baggy overalls? But the girl, with her long blonde hair lying on her shoulders, was literally mesmerizing. Hello, Naru. Sensei has not arrived yet, so you are on time as usual. Sakura muttered as she exhaled, not even looking at the blonde, having become more friendly towards her after their adventures in the land of waves. Kind, was all Sasuke could say, still forcing Haruno to look first at himself, and then at Naruto. Did he finally talk to you? The Nine-Tails grinned ironically in the girl's head. Despite his confession during the battle on the bridge, he still did not miss the opportunity to make a joke in his direction. Still stay away from him, he barked, noticing the guy's surprised and slightly embarrassed look directed at his Jinchuriki. Oh, come on, Kurama! The blonde simply shrugged off the words of her bijou. I hope Kakashi comes soon. I wanted to go see Dad on the way back, she said thoughtfully, completely ignoring the looks of her teammates, sincerely believing that she was not very beautiful. It's up to you, of course. But no, I warned you, the tailed reptile said indifferently, immediately hiding in the depths of her subconscious. Hatake arrived half an hour after Naruto, landing on the roof of the building closest to the meeting place. He glanced briefly at his charges and for a second held his thoughtful gaze on the blonde standing with her back to him. Something about her seemed unusual to the man, but what? Orange clothes, golden hair covering her shoulders, everything seemed to be the same as always, but something still confused him. After a couple of seconds of thought, spitting on his doubts, the copy ninja smoothly jumped from the roof, landing right next to his team. Hi guys, the Jounin said peacefully, attracting the attention of his charges, one of whom, he knew this for sure, I already felt that he was approaching. I'm lost again, Hatake added in an already dejected voice, in an apologetic tone. Not even a year has passed, Kurama said sarcastically from the prompter booth, already tired of silently contemplating the deserted street. Stop lying, Kakashi-sensei, Naruto and Sakura shouted in unison, turning to the man. And the Jounin finally realized what seemed strange to him about the appearance of the Hokage's daughter. She was dressed in a sundress, which she stopped wearing when she was 7 or 8 years old. And this sundress, I must say, definitely suited Naruto, making her look like a porcelain doll, just like in childhood. Okay, guys, the man smiled at them, glancing briefly at the chuckled guy a little to the side. Today we have a simple dog walking task, so go ahead, he drawled, looking at the notebook that imperceptibly found itself in his hands. God, what again? Naruto couldn't stand it when the Nine Tails and Sasuke chuckled in agreement.